If you're just joining us, we started the live stream, but the board is still in non-public session, so they're hopefully going to be here any minute, and we'll get started. So we're just waiting for them.
So many chords. So many chords.
I know, right?
Hello. How you doing? Good, yourself? Not too bad. Oh,
Okay.
excellent.
We volunteered. We really signed up for this.
Difficult to hear the board and ask if we have any other microphones. I don't know if we do, or I don't know if we can pass around that one. If somebody's going to speak, I'll let the board know. Can they come in? Would that be the best way to do it? It's just for them
This
to
one,
use that.
yeah, because the cord is so long.
This,
so we
I got
can-
it really long. I mean, I can get one more microphone. Oh, I don't know where the other microphone is.
I think it's fine just to move that around, and if somebody wants to speak, we'll just ask them to use that mic.
You mean for
Anyone
Q&A?
that's speaking for the audience, just to
Oh,
hear
yes,
them.
okay, yeah.
Do you guys normally have mics when you speak?
Mm.
So do I need to?
Well, they're asking us to use the mic if we're speaking so that they can hear.
Oh, so we're all trained.
There was another mic.
And hopefully there won't be too many people speaking at once.
Well, no, I meant
Hopefully.
you're bored.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder, let me check the other mic.
Probably just one of the two classrooms.
Okay, so they could do two rounds.
They do. We did that because there's so many cars dropping off. They normally dropped off in the front loop, but yes, they're back here. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to in case it came up. The bus is now they have to leave all the way around.
Oh, gotcha.
Could drop off really anywhere.
Yeah,
Drop off
really
at your
cool.
door.
Really cool. People have mentioned that several times. Like, why can't we just cut from over there? But with the portable there, it's just nuts. So that was really cool. Good job, Brian.
Actually, I'll switch out.
Okay. So you're gonna make that.
So just wait for these guys.
Okay. It's a rat's nest.
Hang on to that just so it doesn't fall
Yeah, I
off.
got it. Just turn it off.
What, did you turn it off?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm shocked, to be honest with you. Want me to go call her?
Yeah.
Welcome. Even though it's camera, I got a hot mic.
Hot mic is cool. It's pretty cool. There's more people here than ever.
Yeah. I don't know if she's
I think it's the Lions. Is that Lions head? Right? I think so. It's hard to tell with masks.
All right. Sorry, folks, for making you wait. We were in non-public. We've come out of non-public. We will be going back to non-public at the end of tonight's meeting. The people that were involved in the non-public, there won't be any more questions for them, so you don't need to stick around for that.
Did you lock
Yeah.
this?
Oh,
That being said, thank you all for coming. It's nice to see a group of people. We are going to start off with a brief, little bit of information from the architectural team, but really we want to get into some questions and answers here. So I'm going to turn the floor over to the architects. They're going to tell us what they can tell us, and then hopefully we can clear up and answer any outstanding questions. And before we go, is the streaming?
We're just going to double check that. We had a little bit of an unplug and a replug, so.
And I will also just note, I think we have.
Yeah, so I don't know what we're due when we're done. I don't know why.
Outside of the room on the internet. I don't know how that works. All right. Good?
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate everybody coming out. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you were able to already make the deliberative session? Right. Just about half of you. How about the last school board meeting? We had a presentation about the project as well. All right. So for many of you, some of this information you're going to see is a recap. I'm going to move through it very quickly because the primary purpose of tonight is to recap the information and then turn it over to you guys to answer questions associated with the project. So just understand that the project we've been doing a lot of due diligence associated with the project, and we have done a number of steps to get to where we are, including existing building reviews, including understanding kind of the conditions of the current building. If you were not to do an addition, what needs to be repaired, what needs to be replaced, and what is kind of end of life, and what needs to be planned for in the next coming years. Some of the early findings on the existing conditions review won't shock you to know. There are a number of site issues that we'd like to address. One of the big ones being paving the parking lot, giving adequate space for the bus drop, and giving adequate space for parent drop. So some things we...
For the folks, can you see this, or is it easier if you turn the lights off and make it a little bit?
Maybe it's just really delayed.
If we can dim them, or is that better? Make it a little crisper? Okay. Sorry.
So overall, when we look at the site and we look at the building, we're looking at a 1989 and a 1999 school. So we're talking about a 20 and a 30-year-old facility. When we looked at the systems, we did have engineers come through, look at every system individually, electrical, lighting, mechanical systems. What they found was although the systems have been well maintained, they're really getting to the end of their life. A lot of the systems are about 20 to 30-year systems. So an air handling system, similar to an engine in your car, eventually wears out and needs to be replaced. No matter how often you change your oil, eventually your engine will get to a point where it needs to be rebuilt or replaced. We also found that there is a number of spaces that are undersized in the building. Looking at the spaces in orange, we found a bunch of areas that don't meet Department of Education standards today in terms of classroom size or adequate space for things like the nurses area. We also found a few areas that are severely undersized, like the cafeteria, the room you're in now. For the amount of students we're trying to put in here and do a lunch, it really is undersized to be able to fit all the kids at once. Creating an atmosphere that's really chaotic. Also, it has problems for them to be able to offer the amount of lunches for the students they're supposed to be offered. On the upper floor, we found a lot of issues that need to be addressed through renovations, additions. One of the big things was, according to the fire code, the Life Safety Code 101, you can't have kindergartners, first graders on an upper floor, including any space that they access. So that includes the library or any of their special spaces like art rooms. So some of those areas we're saying not easily addressed through repairs to the building, really needs to be thinking about a permanent addition. On top of that, we went through educationally, looked at undersized rooms, and then we looked at the spaces that aren't there. So 20 to 30 years ago, education was a lot different. There was a lot less special education, a lot less intervention and one-on-one time that educators are expected to implement for students. This building wasn't built for that. So what you see throughout the building is teachers using stairwells, corridors, or things like that to try to implement some of those services. Overall, if you've been to the site at all, you know that there's a portable class or portable building out there that's housing several classrooms. So we found that in addition to the 4 classrooms that are out there that really should have permanent solutions, there's a missing kindergarten classroom today, and there's also 4 additional classrooms that are needed at this building to accommodate population fluctuations we're seeing come through the grade levels. Many of the grade levels are approximately 3 classrooms per grade, but we have bubble years that come through demanding 4 classrooms per grade. And those bubble years we're seeing more and more frequently coming through the district. And we're saying we've got to have a solution to be able to accommodate that without every year trying to figure out where can we take a classroom away or shove more kids in. Now, when we looked at just the repairs to the building, things that are end-of-life systems, life and code safety, things like the fire alarm, which does have a temporary solution on it, but does not have a long-term solution yet. For a life safety system, we looked at about $12.6 million worth of the end-of-life systems, things that need to be replaced, brought into compliance. When we looked at that in terms of what we call soft costs, which is the engineering, the permitting, the bidding, the insurance, etc., we looked at about $5 million worth of cost to do that. And if we decided that as a community, you decided you don't want to bond it and do it all at once, we said, well, we could spread this out across 10 years. And we believe the escalation factor for that is about 2.4 million, totaling, if we do this without a major bond, without doing, all one big chunk, we're probably looking at about $20 million worth of investment just to bring the building kind of back to where it was. Now, to be clear, in looking at that solution, that's dealing with the mechanical systems, repairing the exterior envelopes, the windows, etc., that are due for replacement, energy upgrades, interior finishes that are wearing out. Now, they're not massive everywhere, but you can see cracks in the floor, things like that, just doing spot repairs throughout. Replacing classroom equipment to make it ADA compliant where needed. We're not talking about that $20 million would not address the portables. It would not address bringing students from the upper floor down because we don't have a place to put them. It would not address any growth for those bubble years or modernization of the programs. It would not address site improvements, and it would not allow middle school students to have more education in terms of technical education, tech ed, and family and consumer sciences, used to be called home ec. At the same time, we did work with a group of educators and administrators to understand where are you going as a school district, what's great about Deerfield community school, and what kind of can we do to enhance that in the long run, to start planning, looking as far ahead. What we heard a lot was that the faculty really want a tech-rich school with adequately sized spaces that are safe, code compliant, accessible, and sustainable. Nobody asked for the world here. They just said, just make it workable. We do have, if your kids haven't been in school here recently, they have a great nature-based connection. Kids spend a lot of time outside. They have outdoor classrooms that they were able to implement very affordably, and they continue to want to leverage that as part of their curriculum. They're child-focused, inclusive, and forward-thinking as a staff in general. Unanimously, they agreed, this is us. This is kind of the way we believe education should be implemented. There's a few things that are missing, though. Family consumer sciences, and I'm sure educators here can answer more questions on that, but most 7th and 8th grade students in any of your surrounding towns have a family and consumer sciences class, kind of all of those skills, and they need a lab to be able to do that here. Tech ed used to be called industrial arts, hands-on learning, another skill that they would love to be able to implement at the middle school level that they currently have no space to do that in. That does lead into project-based learning, which could be pushed further down into some of the younger grade levels, so more hands-on learning for the 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th grade students, if they had a space to do that. They did know that teachers said they would really support their work if we had some collaborative areas where they could pull students out to work in small groups, where students could work independently, or where they could work one-on-one with students. They need professional development areas, although they build professional development time into their schedule, and they work hard to accomplish that. They really don't have a place to do that if all of the classrooms are full, which they are. Ultimately, this is a list for them to be able to create critical thinkers with lots of definition of success, whether you're headed into the trades or whether you're headed to college, in a community-based philosophy for students to feel like they belong here. So we looked at a number of solutions with our building committee. The building committee had faculty members, community members, school board members, and they were publicly open. We looked at several options to be able to solve this. Ultimately, we came up with a solution that we think had the best bang for the buck. It essentially accomplished as much as we could. It wasn't the most expensive solution. It admittedly wasn't the cheapest solution either, but it had kind of the best of both worlds. What we landed on was renovating this building 100%, replacing everything so that it again has another 30-year window, that all the roofing, all the lighting, all of the windows are replaced, kind of hit the reset button. Create a classroom addition off to the right-hand side if you're looking at the front that also accommodates both the missing classrooms as well as those tech ed and family consumer science lab. Expand the cafeteria in place. It was the most affordable solution we looked at. And create another community space. Given that community is baked right into the name here, and that we said everything we do for this building should have community use, we identified one area that is difficult for the community use right now. Both teachers during the day as well as community after hours have a difficult time booking the gym if they want to get a large group of people together. The gym is always booked with sports. It's hard to get in there. Even the faculty said, if I want to get more than one class together, I really don't have a place to go. The gym's booked. So the cafeteria is booked. So we sought to create a small community room, and that's that connector connecting the building, the existing building to the new, and to make site improvements. Site improvements including paving the parking, putting in a loop road around the building so that buses can loop the building, and we can separate buses and parent drop-off. Our site plan does seek to minimize wetland impacts. We did have the civil engineer and a wetland scientist come out, look at what we're doing, and say what's permittable, what's not going to cost us a lot of money to do. We are creating, as I noted, those drop-off lanes, a fire lane, and we're looking to revitalize some of the outdoor classrooms. Although they have some great outdoor classrooms, none of them are very close to the building right now. So when we think about kindergarten and first graders traveling to an outdoor classroom, that's a teacher taking a large group of kids to an outdoor classroom. And if they're not close to the building, inevitably somebody gets there and they're going to go back to the class, back to the building to use the bathroom, back out, and it becomes this exercise in futility. Where they said if you could place just a few of them close by, we can get much more use, get the kids outside more. We are proposing a leach field expansion. a new pump house. We are also proposing, if you look at the roof there, a solar power purchase agreement, which would allow us to implement solar at the school without an investment from the community, and it would fix our electric rate off those solar panels to try to stabilize our utility bills. Diagrammatically, you can see our specialty classrooms and our classrooms going on the right-hand side of the presentation area. You can see the grade level breakout areas being renovated inside the building. By moving some students into the new addition, that gives us a little bit of flexibility in the floor plans to create small group spaces for one-on-one, for intervention, for special education, for meetings with teachers and meetings with students. And on the left-hand side, you can see the proposed community center. That's part of the other article that we pulled off as an option for this community. Starting with that community center on the left-hand side, the community center is very straightforward. It's a gym space with bleachers, locker rooms, its own dedicated entrance, so it could be used either during the school day or after hours, independently of the school. It does have an office area and it does have storage. In the main building here, you can see the blue spaces, that's specialty spaces, so what we would call special. So you get the main gym remaining in place, cafeteria with its growth. The light areas, those are classrooms, light blue are classrooms. You can see the little yellow spots where we took some space out. That's taking one classroom out to be able to add in a couple small group areas to accommodate the needs we had for special education. You can see at the front of the building, the green areas, that's administration and nursing area growing. The right-hand side of the entrance, that's special education areas. Current people that work in this building that just don't have a space to use, growing in place. And you can see our addition as I've already described. On the upper floor, that gives us the ability that there are no longer any specials on the upper floor that kindergarten and first grade would travel to. So library has come downstairs, art has come downstairs. That allows our upper floor to have third and fourth grade, as well as seventh and eighth grade. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth are all filling out the upper floor. You can see on the right-hand side of our addition, the two blue spaces, that's family and consumer sciences and tech ed, and our middle school classrooms. So we've got our seventh and eighth grade right next to them. Overall, we're looking at about 39,000 square feet of growth in many different categories. You can see if you look at the proposed solution on the right-hand side, we've got about 8,900 square feet of growth in classrooms, 13,000 square feet of growth in specialty labs, and that's right-sizing spaces to bring them into the standards. We've got about 1,000 square feet of special education growth in intervention areas, 3,000 square feet of meeting rooms. What used to be a meeting room is now currently being used for anything they can. There are no meeting rooms here. They're all filled with offices and people that work for the district. Administration growth is about 3,000 square feet. That common area, the areas that currently are being used in stairwells and corridors that are pulled off the corridor, is about 6,000 square feet of growth. And then we have toilet rooms, mechanical space for another 3,000. If you look at the building after we're done, you can see that 62% exists today. We're seeing a 21% growth in classroom area, 7% growth in special education, 6% in common areas, and 4% in support areas. So that's the proposed growth when we're done. The building itself, we are proposing an energy efficient building with an envelope that exceeds the energy code significantly. We're proposing durable materials like masonry that match the existing building. So again, we're trying to create a 30-year building or longer, with proper maintenance. We're proposing replacing all the windows, the roofing, the mechanical systems on that existing building. And you can see the entrance to the community room on the right-hand side, as well as the entrance to the community center on the left-hand side. There's a view of the new wing. Adequate natural light into every classroom was prioritized. The entrance to the community room. There's the community center on the left-hand side, and the main entrance to school, which remains. Another view of that multi-purpose community space. During the day, what we looked at is all the list of the activities that educators said, we don't have a spot to do this. We tried to lump them into one room and say, let's set up a room that can really serve them a multitude of ways. The room is set up for about 100 people, so that means you can pull entire grade levels into here, or a little bit more. You can do presentations. It is equipped with AV, so you can do distance learning. You can do meetings like this one, that it's all set up. Has a good audience section. It is very flexible, and it has direct access from the outside. Overall, we are on a schedule that if we were to pass a vote this March, that would give us 10 months to continue to refine this project, to do the engineering, to do the final design, bid documents, blueprints, and bid the project out about a year from now in February and March of 2023. We have construction phases that last about 24 to 30 months of construction. We would start with critical issues in the summer, things like the fire alarm, things that we could accomplish in the summer. Now we can't, summer's about 6 weeks, so we've got to mobilize and hit the critical issues that first summer. We can also set up our site to separate out construction zones from student zones. That gives us the ability to start with the addition. The addition takes about a year. Once the addition is done, we can move a portion of the student body into that addition and vacate a portion of this building. From there, we're planning to go through this building roughly 1/4 of it at a time, allowing a portion of the building to be occupied by the contractor, while the other 3/4 of the building are occupied by the students, and separating those two populations out. That allows school to stay in session and allows contractors to do the work they need to do. The work is significant enough that it cannot easily be accomplished during summers. Many of these projects simply couldn't be accomplished in a single summer. So we're talking about taking down all the HVAC systems, the lighting, the ceiling, and putting it all back. We kind of run out of hours in a day to do that, and we don't really want to pay the premium for 3 shifts of construction. That gives us the ability then to turn over the project roughly in August of 2025. A couple important notes here. One is our bid date is intentionally targeted for these months. In New Hampshire, this is our most competitive bid months. And this is why we would love to bid this project out this time of year when contractors are really hungry for work and lining up their summer work. The top line is the state education funding. So we've already submitted a preliminary application for building aid. In July, we'll need to submit a full application for building aid, including updated drawings, engineering reports, as well as updated estimates for construction. In January of 2023, the state will issue a list telling us if we ranked well for state funding. The way the state takes these is every district applies, they score them, rank them, and they start funding at the top of the list until they run out of money. We'll know in January next year if we're in the top several that are likely to get funded. We'll also know at that point how much the state is planning to fund in that account, putting us in line to receive funding, if we did receive funding, in July of 2023. Unfortunately, we can't tell you now if you're going to get state funding. Nobody can. In order to receive state funding, you must have passed a bond vote locally. So you would be ineligible if you don't pass a bond vote before July of 2023. Overall, this is our phasing plan. As I noted, phase 1 is site enabling work. What we're calling phase 2 is the addition. And then phase 3 is several phases within the building. The community center, if opted by the community, could be done at the same time that we're renovating portions of this building. The project costs are significant. We're looking at a roughly $21 million in new construction. We're looking at about $14 million in renovations. The cost savings there is that we previously said it'd be $12 million to renovate this building if we did it in multiple phases. By bidding it all at once and implementing it across that 1-year span, we're saving about $5 million. We are budgeting $5.8 million in escalation and contingencies. That money, if not spent, if the construction market stabilizes or even drops, that money is returned to the taxpayer. It's an open book accounting process. And we have other soft costs, including computer equipment, wireless access points, servers, furniture of about $4 million, totaling a $45.5 million project. The tax impact on that in the district granite is on a 30-year bond at current interest rates. It peaks in year 2 at about $3.66 per thousand. And you can see it declines every year thereafter, averaging $2.86 across the life. Looking at the community center by itself, the community center is about a $6.4 million addition. We've got escalation assigned to that and contingencies about $1.3 million. Again, anything unspent goes back to the taxpayer. And then other soft costs of about $730,000, including everything from engineering to equipment that goes inside the gym. An $8.43 million project. The tax rate on that is about 75 cents in its worst year, second year. And it drops down an average of about 60 cents per thousand across the life. With that, I know that was very fast. Some of you have seen it 3 times already. Happy to go back and cover anything people have. I know there's a microphone. I think, being that the meeting is live streamed, if you have questions, we appreciate if you come up and use the microphone so everybody at home can hear your question. Is that okay?
Good evening, I'm Matt Burke. So I want to know what speculation it is that the school board takes over a meeting center for the people of Deerfield.
So are you referring to the second article for the community center?
I got here a little late. So why is the school board involved in a community center?
So this is this is a community school. When we were going through the development of the plans, it became apparent that there was a potential option for us to add a community recreation center on the facility. It was proposed as the second article, independent of what we need, which is the addition on the school. So the voters had an opportunity to act on that if they decided to.
All right, so the school board is taking on, it's their responsibility to start a community center.
The school board found an opportunity in the design plans when we were reviewing everything, present another option to the community, yes.
Yeah, well, I think that's totally wrong. And 2, why doesn't your figure show the $25 million that we're going to be spending in interest on doing this?
So there are bond costs, and we have published bond tables with what the finalized costs are to the bond. They're published, and we certainly can put them back up.
So your 40 actually turns into 80.
No.
75.5.
No.
From what I saw.
Well, so if you're reviewing the information that you're finding on Facebook, the math isn't entirely correct. It works out to be about 60, 65 if you go full term on the 45.5 million.
65 if you go to full term on it, and 20% overrun on everything you're doing, because I'm in the construction business.
Mr. Board.
Everything is 20% overrun.
So the contingencies are actually built into the $45.5 million number. So we've received a guaranteed maximum price. That was part of the process in this whole thing. So there's $5.8 million in contingencies built into the $45.5 million proposed bond.
I see that. Where's the interest on that?
The bond interest is part of the bond process.
It's not showing it there.
Correct, because the cost is $45.5 million. That's the amount we received.
And add on another approximately $22.5 million in interest. You're not showing that.
And
You're backdooring this.
no,
You are.
on the bond tables have been published.
And if I could just chime in, I think it's important to not conflate.
I can't hear you. I'm deaf. I don't have my hearing aids.
I think it's important to not conflate.
And your name?
My name is Jeff Kelly.
Okay, Jeff.
And I think it's important to not conflate the two things. On the bond tables, what you see represented as the estimated bond payments, the tax impact, reflects those interest payments. So while the interest amount's not shown in that construction figure, we could certainly add a line item for that.
You're going to be adding line items for a lot more than that.
Okay, I'd appreciate constructive questions, but those bond rates based on your estimated tax impact reflects the interest payment. So I'm not sure what you think is being backdoored. We could certainly add a line item to show you the interest we're gonna pay on the bond, if that's a concern.
Well,
But nothing's being backdoored. Also, I would note that, as far as why the school board's taking on the community center approach, I don't know if you've ever been here on the weekends or after hours, but Parks and Rec uses this building, probably 5-6 days a week, if not more. So we've always been a community school, embraced the community with open arms. And while we struggled constantly with the school to, have adequate space in the gym to meet those needs, it's always been a community building with community events. So.
and that's for your after-school program.
Nope, that's Parks and Rec. We don't have an after-school program at the school. Parks and Rec has an after-school program.
Okay, so what is the other things that are being done here to serve the
Education.
community?
I'm not sure what you mean by that question.
Well, you just got done telling me that the school does a lot of things after school. What are they?
The school doesn't. Parks and Rec and other community departments do. So basketball program, baseball, soccer, lots of things for the families. Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, PTO. If you have an idea for a club and want to start something, we'd be happy to entertain it.
I didn't hear you.
If you have an idea for a club, we'd be happy to entertain that, start something in the community.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Andrea, hotel. I have a question, since you have the estimated tax impact here of the borrowing. What interest rate, you keep talking about the current interest rate and that it's very favorable right now, and I agree that it is. But I have a concern that what we think we're borrowing at now won't be what's out there 10 or 12 months from now. Federal Reserve people are talking about
So at least they're getting
0.5%
audio at least.
increase in the Fed rate. They're talking about, one of them at least, is talking about maybe we'll need a 1% to curb inflation. So what rate is involved in this presentation?
So, how are you, Andrea?
Hi, Jeff. Yeah.
So the calculations are based on 3%.
I cannot hear you.
The calculations are based on a 3% bond rate. The last bond sale last year was 1.96. We're estimating 2.5 for this year, but we carry 3% for these years.
And you guarantee that?
So bonds are negotiated separately upon the passage of an
I'm just
article.
asking, can you guarantee that?
So if the article passes, the board would then negotiate the bond.
You're not answering the question.
You don't have the floor.
Can you guarantee that?
Mr. Board, we've given you an opportunity to speak.
I'm
At
asking
this,
you,
Mr.
can
Board,
you guarantee that?
Mr. Board, I'm gonna say this to you,
talk
it's the
down to
same,
me.
it's the same response I've given at every meeting we've had. We treat everybody respectfully here.
And
We're
I'm
gonna let,
asking you a direct question.
Mr. Board,
Can you guarantee that?
Mr. Board, there's plenty of people here that have come to hear this presentation. You'll have another opportunity to speak
That's
after
it.
everybody else has.
That's gonna be
Until
the
then,
next
I'm gonna
question
ask
I
you to
ask.
remain silent. Andrea,
Okay, I just, wanted to know what was built in as a potential.
so we're
So you're
carrying,
saying going from like the
So-
$2.50 or 2.5, maybe up to 3%. That's kind of the,
we're carrying so the numbers are predicated on 3%. The last year's bond sale was 1.95 or 1.96. The estimate is for 2.5, but we're carrying 3 as a, make sure we're okay.
okay. Well, in looking at a residential community such as Deerfield, one of the things I did was look at the total non-utility valuation, divided it by some number of residential units that's out there in the census. And it appears that the average house right now in Deerfield is about a $400,000 valuation. Lots of valuations went up with the revaluation. That means that your interest piece here in year one would be, well, not just the interest, the bond would be about a $700 increase for that house. And in year two, it would be about a $1,500 increase. Those things are on top of the regular operating budget and the town budget. So, those are big numbers, which we all know. So my second question has to do with, I think industrial arts are a great thing to have. How many K through 8 schools, you say other middle schools have this, how many K through 8 schools have industrial arts and specialized rooms for those purposes?
So when we're a K through 8 school, we still operate a middle school within the confines of our K through 8 school. So isolating the industrial arts down and just being applicable to a K through 8 school, there's less K through 8 schools in New Hampshire that are not applicable to every community. A lot of the surrounding middle schools offer an industrial arts program similar to what we're presenting. I've never looked at the data in comparison to a K through 8 school because we really need to try to give the middle school students their own identity, and this is part of creating a more robust middle school experience.
Okay. What do you actually have involved in your industrial arts? What are you building there? Because one of the things we heard was at the meeting the other day is these new rooms will mean 2 to 3 new faculty people. So extra cost again on top of what's actually being presented here. What about building those rooms out? Industrial arts equipment is also expensive.
So that's all calculated into the bond figures we have. That's part of the soft cost.
The equipment and furnishings okay, so it's not just the construction.
Correct. The bond figure is to equip, outfit, and build a turnkey, for lack of a better term.
Okay. And if you're doing big projects, I think that being on the second floor may not be the best place for industrial arts, just on an off chance that big industrial programs, such as the Manchester School of Technology, they're a one-floor operation,
I think certainly a different scale than what we're presenting.
Yeah, I think so. But again, I see things that I think are great additions that are wants as opposed to needs, and this is a really big ask for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rowena Burke, and I've got only 2 questions for you. First one's about the money. I think once you've got through and if this thing passes, it's going to be a wonderful school that's going to serve the community well. I'm completely on board with a community school idea. I think it's important to integrate the school with the community, so I'm kind of in favor of this. But it's always about the money. And you explained right at the beginning that the state has money set aside and they hand it out all the priority. My first question is, did you look at what it takes to get to the top of the list and how closely do you meet that?
So, excellent question. The state has several categories. Each category is weighted differently. So things like safety, this would be categories like your fire alarm, kids on an upper floor. That's worth about 250 points, the highest category of any. The state has other things like sustainability worth 100 points. Are you making your building more sustainable? Are you willing to commit to a high performance school, which is what we're designing consistently with? That's worth another 100 points. Overall, we have looked at all of the categories for the state. We have, our firm worked with Salem this last, about a couple years ago, submitted their application, who was funded through the state. They received $11 million in state aid. While we can't say you're going to be at the top of the list because we have no idea who's submitting, only the state will know that, and they'll only know that this July. We do believe we have a lot of categories that the state is looking for funding. Ultimately, like any competitive thing, it's also your opponent. How many other communities are submitting? How bad are their safety needs compared to your safety needs? But we do believe we're hitting the intent of the state funding application with a lot of the decisions we've made about moving this project forward.
Thank you. Second question goes back to the community, and town on its own is not the only part of the community. There are always surrounding towns. And I'm hearing that Deerfield actually does an awful lot to serve surrounding schools. So my second question is about the children themselves who are going to be benefiting from this. How many of those children are actually from Deerfield, projected through the 30-year life of what they're going to be paying for? And how many of them are coming in from surrounding towns? And again, what are the projections over the 30 years? Did that all get factored into the
I may not be understanding your question correctly, so I may ask a clarifying question. So the school, we educate Deerfield students here at DCS. So the school, any potential expansion, addition is utilized for the children in this community specifically. There are additional programs as far as athletics and some other things where other schools will come here to participate with our students. But DCS's school is for this community and for the children in this community.
So there are no students coming in from neighbouring towns who also participate in the in-school programs?
No.
Okay. And the growth portion of that is then my second question. I've seen population charts, admittedly on the internet, but not on Facebook, where I'm seeing that the population growth is actually flattening. And I'm wondering how that factored into the future design here.
So we had done some demographic studies over a number of years, and we looked at a series of kind of metrics. We were seeing a fairly consistent growth curve, and it was trending in a fairly consistent direction. And unfortunately, with COVID, it affected some of the numbers, and it also affected our ability to pull that data to update, because the state that we pull a lot of the data from hasn't updated any of the figures since 2019. So we have seen a bit of a flat line, but we are pretty comfortable that that is also attributed to some of the COVID-related circumstances that we know in the world today. We know that that's going to end, and we're going to address that.
Hi, John Leslie. I got a couple questions. First one, we discussed the costs, but there's no estimate for the increased annual costs if this passes. We're going to be hiring a large number of teachers. We're going to be expanding out the school itself. The budget for electricity, the budget for heating, cooling, that's all going to increase. Do you guys have any idea what the annual increase of the actual school budget is going to be?
So it's a great question. It's a difficult question to answer. Part of that answer is going to be driven by the engineering that's done. We're going to be looking to make efficiency improvements in the existing plans, as well as build a remarkably efficient building. And we hope to produce a larger footprint that operates on about the same energy cost as what we're currently utilizing. A lot of that's going to be with building additional efficiencies and all the mechanical systems throughout, purchase agreement on the electrical panels. But it's impossible to predict a more direct answer to that, because there's a significant amount of engineering that has to go into all the mechanical systems, the electrical loading out, and everything else that we can't do until we get deeper into the project.
Okay. Have you guys looked at how much increase in faculty will there be, and what's that cost going to be?
So estimated for certified staff, I believe, is 3.
I just want to clarify that when we're talking about hiring staff, that doesn't necessarily come year one. We have a small section of our library that's currently being used for our technology education, and that teacher would be thrilled to have some space. So it's not necessarily hiring new staff. If we had a family consumer science area, if we didn't get a new teacher to start the school year, or even for the first couple of years, I can guarantee you the creativity and the willingness of this staff to go into those programs, they will make sure that those spaces are utilized. So ideally, it would be great to have a teacher for each of those new programs, but we could still utilize the space without hiring new staff right away.
Want to add anything?
No, I think that's well said. Thank you.
So that was really not an answer.
No,
What? Okay.
Let me help.
If we were going to fill every classroom that we're now expanding out to, it would only be 3 new teachers for how many places?
Yeah. So I believe that it'd be about 3 certified staff. Special education staff varies based on student specific need, so it's impossible to calculate that because we don't know the needs of students in 4, 5, 10, 20 years. But the certified staff is
So I think there have been some misconceptions that microphone. I think there have been some misconceptions because it looks like we're adding so many classrooms. I think people are forgetting that those additional classrooms are really replacing the classrooms that live in the portables out there. So So when we're talking about the addition of classrooms, really, we're talking about the addition of those, mostly for certified staff, the family and consumer science and the tech ed. But there have been, I think, I don't know if the picture was misleading, but there have been people saying, well, they're talking about 8 new classrooms. Is that going to be 8 new teachers? So I just wanted to remind people that the new classrooms, in the addition, really are replacing classrooms and resizing classrooms.
So based on that, then, are we actually adding 21% classroom space?
Yes, we are.
Not including the modulars.
So the modulars would be incorporated into the new facility. There's already teachers in the modulars, so it would just be joyfully abandoning the trailers and then moving inside. And then again, if we fully staffed out, if you're looking at, we're estimating about 3 staff members. And again, the staff members that are working in non-classrooms right now, they would effectively be given classrooms too, so that we would actually give them some space more.
Right, I get that. But I'm this is another line that I'm curious about that I actually had a question on. So we take out the modulars and add the new classroom space, and that's still an additional 21% increase with taking the modulars away?
Yes.
Okay. And then I had a question on the solar buyback. So you said it would equalize the amount of electricity or the rate we pay for electricity over time?
Similar to other things, the solar has a lot of things that we have to solve after as part of the power purchase agreement. But generally, the way the power purchase agreement works is that a company would come in, they would put solar all over your roof, they'd partner with you, they would pay for the install, they own the panels. You're a nonprofit, so you can't get any tax credits from having those. They broker the tax credits for you, and that's how they pay for the panels. In exchange, they own the equipment, they maintain those equipment, which is important for a school district. They sell you power off those panels back to your school for whatever you use or back to your utility bill. That power is set at a fixed rate negotiated as part of that power purchase agreement. The goal they have is to set that rate lower than the current rate you're paying or lower than any projected rate that your utility company is going to have. Those panels, you likely will sign an agreement for either a 10 or 20-year window, and that fixes those utility costs. To be clear, though, we're not installing enough solar panels to power the whole building. We're looking at trying to get a good percentage. We are partnering right now and trying to have one of those power purchase sellers give us an estimate of what percentage we could expect so that we can start estimating how much money would we save by doing this.
I had one more question. So you guys mentioned surrounding schools quite a bit. When you're saying, like with the middle school, most of them have consumer arts, I think is what's called now.
Sure.
Something along those lines.
A lot of fun.
Right. So are those schools that we're looking at and we're comparing to, are they similar to Deerfield in the fact that we're mostly a residential community and based on size, right? Because we can say, oh, nearby schools and then say Raymond, right? Which is nowhere near the same makeup, size, so on and so forth for Deerfield. It's not really a one-to-one comparison.
So it's certainly difficult to find a community identical to Deerfield as far as, the way we're structured. So when we look at surrounding communities, we find that there is a fairly common theme that the middle schools are offering programs similar to that. Because of where we live, every community is a little bit different. Deerfield has zoned itself into a unique circumstance that a lot of other communities haven't necessarily done the same way. So again, we're unique in that regard, which is what it is. But it is a fairly common theme that we're finding these consumer arts programs. And again, there's a lot of students that can benefit from that type of learning. And so it really allows the staff to try to capture every student in the way that they learn. And there can be a huge benefit to those kids. Yeah. Sorry.
I think it's also important to note that, comparing ourselves to surrounding towns, well, it makes, on the surface level, a lot of sense. other towns could be 10 years, 15 years behind us. What LaValle Brensinger brought, and when we select them as the architect, is they specialize in education design. They stay on top of where education is going in the 21st century. And the goal of this project wasn't to just get rid of the modulars. It was to provide an educational facility that's going to meet the needs for our students to become the 21st century citizens. So the technology-rich spaces, the family and consumer sciences, kind of those maker spaces where engineering technology is becoming so ingrained in our society and our trades. It's an incredibly important part of the educational process. So just looking and saying, oh, Candia or Auburn or Hooksett, that's really tough to do just because we're not all building schools. But I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Sort of. Last question that I had that just popped in my head, I'm sorry. You said the 45 million plus interest is a maximum bid. There is no way that'll be any higher than that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and if it comes in under miraculously somehow,
You save money.
it's a firm fixed price contract.
And I want to be clear about the way that works too. If the bond vote passes, that sets and binds all of us to $45.5 million cannot be spent. You can't spend $1 more than that. For our firm, we've done more than 300 schools in New Hampshire across the last 45 years. We've never had to go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money for the same project. Kind of the agreement is from now on, 45 million is the absolute top. If bids came in high, we're essentially designing to the number. One important part of this is the bidding process. This project is not fully engineered. Not all decisions are made, but we're going to competitively bid this. If it comes in way under, great, that money is saved to the taxpayers. If it goes over, that's not allowed. So the way we get there is as the designs develop, we engage construction managers in the area to estimate the project, to constantly tell us what trades are going up, what trades are going down, so that our final design can reflect what the market conditions are. So if sacrifices need to be made, we make those as we go. If changes need to be made, as an example, if steel went really high and masonry came down, then we can say, all right, we're going away from a steel frame to a masonry frame. But essentially, from the yes vote on, we're designing to the budget. We're working with the building committee to make decisions to say we've still got to design whatever solution to the $45.5 million absolute cap.
So based on what you just said, we might vote yes on the bond and then not get, like, say, we price everything out, bids come in really high. We might not get the same amount of square footage or.
Yeah, our goal is to build the same project. We have never post bond decided to build half the school.
Right, but how many
so
times
we're
have
not,
you guys built in inflationary times like this?
We are dealing obviously with abnormal times. As part of that, our estimates reflect that. So not only do we ask people when they estimated this, we went to the trades and asked, what is your price going to be a year from now? We also, in addition to that, took another escalation factor to say, let's add 10% on top of that, ultimately as worst case scenario. So you really are voting on worst case scenario, and we believe we can hit that number. Now, fine tune adjustments, like we said, making decisions on what type of mechanical system would you like. Some of those are going to be cost decisions, and it's all about constantly balancing that budget as the engineering comes online.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Stacy Marciani, and thank you for providing this session and answering everybody's questions tonight. I have a couple, if you would bear with me, although Zach, you guys have answered quite a few actually. In terms of the community center and the bond, is there an option for, say we don't get any money, let's deal with the bond first. Say we don't get any money from the state, right? We get no matching funds. Is it correct that we have to vote and approve this to be built now, apply then for state grant funds later? If we don't get them, is there an option to bail on the project or some portion of it?
So, we need one more mic. I apologize. All right. So if we look at the application process for state aid, maybe just high level that first. So if we pre-apply, we submit our final application in July, we get ranked and scored. We have to have a shovel-ready project prior to the state releasing funds. It has to be bonded and ready to go. So that process really gives us a March vote this year. If it doesn't pass, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it doesn't pass, we would have an opportunity to apply again, we'd have an opportunity to bond again next year and still qualify for the next budget's state aid funds. So we have this year, if it doesn't pass, we could take another swing at it next year, but we have to have a bond in place to receive the funds.
Okay.
Does that
So,
make sense?
yeah, well, releasing funds and shovel ready, so, but there's a window there, right? So releasing funds, obviously you have to have a shovel ready project, but before that, there is an opportunity to kind of go back at it. Sorry, just clarify, I'm not being clear, but clarify at what point,
So
if the state does not come through with any kind of funding,
if
what
the state,
options does the town
the way the
have?
article is written right now, we're planning to move forward whether or not you get state funding, but apply for the state funding. Ultimately, it's up to any school board. If they decide to cancel a project, they can cancel a project at any time. But the way this article is written, we're planning to move forward with or without state funding and do our best to get the state funding, mostly because it's needed. So that is the goal of the project. We aren't proposing that if the state gives us no money, that we're going to cancel the project. At any time post bond, a school board has the ability to not spend the money and return the money. They have, I believe, a stipulated time to return funds. As you noted, our window to pass a bond and still end up in this biennium for the state is either this March or next March. The problematic part of next March is that our application will have already gone in with our final drawings to the state. So we'd be going back to the state saying, please amend our application. So if we rank high and we said, you know what, we're not going to do these 5 or 6 safety items because we're lowering, because escalation's gone up, we're trying to lower our costs and take another bite at the apple, then we have to amend that application. We can't amend it so much that we put in an application for project 1 and we're building project 2, which is completely different.
Right, so is there a way that a conditional warrant comes to the town such that if the town does not get
Not at this point.
state funding, is that something you would consider as a school board?
So,
Because you could, I mean, I talked to you about the city of Rochester, right? They got 50% matching grants to put at the tech center to Spalding High School. That's a whole different conversation with the town. That, hey, I've got, half of the value of this project in state matching funds. Will you approve the other half? Then I don't know if we'll get any money or not. So is there
So certainly at this point, we can't do that because the articles are going on the ballot as they've been presented. If it doesn't pass this year, we're certainly going to look at every option to look at for next year. But as it's currently written, the bonds are, the articles going on the ballot.
Okay. I think that's maybe something that the school board should consider. Because like I said, I think what I'm hearing is a lot of opposition to the cost. And again, it's a whole nother ballgame if you've got some funding to offset that. I can certainly see where the money is needed. The community center, is that coming through as a second warrant article? So could the project be approved without the community center?
So there are 2 articles on the ballot. So the first one is the 45.5 for the addition to the facility as well as the renovation of this building to create that entirely new educational space, effectively giving us an entirely new school. The second article would be the community center. The way that the articles are written, if Article 1 does not pass, then Article 2 can't pass. So Article 2 only goes into effect if it passes and Article 1 passes. The reason why the school board broke the projects up and why we really put a contingency on is the engineering, a lot of the engineering and mobilization is really tied to the first bond or the first article. And the need for us is the additional educational space. There happened to be this, opportunity to create a community space as well. So that's for the voters to decide on what they want to do.
Okay, and it looks like that's a gym right now, essentially?
It's a very large open space that could have a multi-use floor in it, and possibly, it'd be used for a little bit of it.
Okay.
But it would resemble a gym, I think, to a very certain extent.
Kitchen facilities?
That would be to be determined because it's early in the process for that.
Okay, I didn't see them on the site plan. Right, it was lockers, bathrooms,
Yeah,
bleachers.
at the moment, it's lockers and bathrooms and bleachers.
Okay. And there was something mentioned about needing space to bring in a couple of different classrooms together, and there's no space for
So
that.
if we go back to the drawings, I've been using the term knuckle. I don't know if the architects
Okay,
like that or
that
not, but,
connects that, yes, that
but
was my
if we
question.
look at our knuckle, and it's, that space right there, which would give us a fairly sizable room, about 150, I think is what we're estimating. People would be able to bring into that space. We'd have it wired for AV and everything else, so it would be a great presentation space, meeting space, be an opportunity for us to hold events there as well. So if that space would probably see a considerable amount of usage, just the nature of what it would become.
And the community center during the day, are there any plans for the school to utilize that for kids for any activities during the school day?
So certainly very early again in the process with the community center side of it, because it's something that we realized it was a potential later in the process. There would be the potential for the kids to use it, the potential for the community, but it's very early in the process for us to determine exactly how that space would be utilized.
Okay, so the intent of that is really not as educational or school-related space. It's more for community space. So if Park and Rec needs space, if organizations, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, whatever, have things that they want to do, you have this space.
And the school would also have access to it for its own programming. If we have plays, if we have the gym, which is also our auditorium, is being set up for plays and shows and whatnot, we could then spill into that space for our own TV classes and other programs.
So it's not partitioned, it's one open space, right?
Just real quick. With that space, it's just important to note that, as Lance said, we are going to be designing to a number. That number, we know we can accomplish what we've shown there. We were talking with Parks and Rec earlier this year about potential uses for it, what they would like to see in it. There's a lot of work there in hashing out the logistics with both the school and Parks and Rec and how that could work. So as far as partitions, exactly what that's going to look like, there's some flexibility there still that needs to be ironed out between both the school board itself and Parks and Rec.
Okay, and I was just wondering about that versus the Old Town Hall building, because you have a building there that, from what I see, is not utilized a lot, versus, kind of building that out a little bit. It's right in the center of town, it's right at the playground, and utilizing that as more of a community center as opposed to building a brand new building. And what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, so one of the concerns, and I'm not speaking for the board in this capacity, I'm speaking as a town member, but one of the concerns with that building is the police station is housed there, along with Parks and Rec.
Sorry, so I mean the Old Town Hall.
Oh, the Old Town Hall, I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, I said George B. White.
Yep, that I can't speak to. I don't know anything about the Old Town Hall and its use.
As far as the historic town hall?
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as using that as a community center as opposed to building a brand new building, I'm just wondering what, kind of what your thoughts are there, one building versus another.
So my thoughts on the historic town hall, it's a great building and it's an asset to the community, but I don't know that I'd cut 100 children loose in an old historic building. It's not ADA compliant, it's not entirely ADA compliant. It has its own deficiencies. And I don't know that the community would want to add on to that building with its historic character that it currently has. It's certainly something that could be a different conversation. But, right. Yeah. There's I'm sure limitations with it being an historical building and how you could actually modify and adjust it.
Can I say something to that? Because are you talking about, so they used to have the cookie clubhouse there, and when the other Parks and Rec, the director of Parks and Rec was a different person, he actually utilized that space a lot, and it was awesome. We did, like, younger kids would have this, like, I swear it was filled with at least 100 kids, and they would do, like, decorate cookies during the holidays. They had, like, he would teach them how to do certain dances. There's a big kitchen there. He would set up obstacle courses. I just think the other Parks and Rec director did utilize that space a lot more than they actually, I called there to have a meeting, I want to say last month, and it's like you can't even get access to it. So I think maybe that would be a discussion with Parks and Rec. So given that
I'll let you go next. So.
given that the community center is what, almost 20%?
It's a separate bond, but it's about 8.5 roughly.
8.5 million.
Yeah, 8.5.
45.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not
on top.
Oh, it's on top of the 45.
It's separate.
It is. Okay. Sorry, my misunderstanding. So I think a valuable exercise would be to look at what it would take to do something with the old town hall versus building a new community center. And I've dealt with several historic buildings in different aspects of my careers. And you can put new mechanicals in these buildings. You can put additions on these buildings. You might not be able to disrupt the facade of it, but you can do actually quite a lot with them. So I would be interested in seeing that evaluated a little bit more. And taking, maybe it's $1.5 million, and you have a robust community center right there, as opposed to almost 8.5. So that's just something that I think would be a valuable exercise. So that's all. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'm going to let Mr. Colbert speak, just because you kind of brought him up. Thank you, Mr. Colbert. Good Church Street, so much all I've got about 40 years of experience in historic preservation. I retired. When I retired, I was the deputy historic officer from New Hampshire. I am well acquainted with and cannot be done under the law to historic buildings. The town can, if the town can't expend its own funds to do whatever they wish to that building. There are no restrictions on it if they use their own money. The only time restrictions apply is if you use federal funds or that you need federal permits for licensing. At that point, there needs to be consideration of whether or not there is any adverse effects to the building. Now that's a very specific term. It's a common term, uncommon definition. There are various things that are defined as adverse effects, carrying down adverse effects. Putting new mechanicals, probably not. These people write about a lot, do a lot of things with an historic building, even if there happens to be federal funds. There are any number of sources of federal funds out there. But in terms of using that building, it is wide open. You could hypothetically change the facade if you just use money. I wouldn't recommend it. I would argue against it. But I would have to admit right up front that it would be allowed. So there is a misconception that something is historic, that is somehow frozen in place, frozen in time. That is not the case. And in fact, there's a very wide range of activities, changes that can be made to a historic building. In fact, some cases should be made to a historic building to make sure that it lasts longer. And this is the final thing. It's been here for a long time. It's served well. It's had many people in it. It serves many uses. I think it has a long future.
I feel so bad for this poor woman. Yeah, no idea. I'm Bobby. I'm from Brown Road. I know this. I've been going around in my head trying to figure this out because it sounds like a stupid question. When you tear down or remove the modulars, are you moving the modulars so that you can build and then getting rid of them? Does that sound stupid? Where are they going to go?
Somewhere.
Your house.
we do have an answer to this one. Our plan is to relocate the modulars out back. So we're planning to relocate the modulars back there, and that's that first summer. Relocate the modulars, rehook them up, re-equip them, temporary location out back, new, and then fence in our new construction area, creative construction entrance, and get us back up and running that first summer.
Okay, not too far away, right?
Not too far away. I mean, we have a couple site options. Obviously, really close to the building right behind us is one, but we really do want to continue to review that with the principal, with the educators to say if it goes here, how does that work for the buses? We have a couple options there. We are also flattening this area of the site for the community center. In Article 1, we're creating that site work, so we have the option of could we flatten this area and put them here if the community center didn't pass. Ultimately, we think either option is going to work, but yes, our goal is no further than they are now, very close to the building, get them up and operational again before kids show up.
So in Article 1, even though it's totally separate from Article 2, you said you're still flattening that, even if you don't pass that?
Well, Article 1 includes the site work, all of the site work. Oh. And if we decide we're not doing the community center, we're going to have a flat piece of land here. And we did include just the basic cost, not putting a foundation in by any means, just the basic cost of while we have excavators here, make sure that area would be flat. So in the future, you have that set up so you could do this project. So we want to set it up. If everybody says yes to Article 1, does the school, that in the future you could still consider a gym addition. Since we have excavators on site and we're doing grading, as you can see around here, it would be advantageous for us to at least clear that area and make sure it's properly drained and connect with our drainage. So we're doing a little bit of site work there, and not the full site work of putting in foundations or anything like that.
Okay. The other one is also kind of stupid in my head. Right now, and maybe this is just like looking too far ahead, right now DCS is having a really hard time finding teachers. So like my student hasn't had a Spanish teacher like at all. How are you going to even get new teachers if you make new classes? She's like, what? I mean, Spanish, pretty important.
I don't have an answer for you. Obviously, being able to advertise early this year for a foreign language teacher will help us hopefully attract a teacher for that program. And then, we have been able to fill our positions. Right now, we're in a really unique circumstance where everybody's looking for staff, but we historically have not had a problem filling our positions here.
Okay. And the other one was mentioned that the deliberative, I think it kind of goes side and side with that. I know that even just myself, there's a lot of micro schools popping up, and a lot of the teachers are actually leaving the public schools there and making their own little thing. Has the board, I don't even know if you guys are aware of this, but like, I myself, like, I'm starting micro school next year with 10 kids, and then there's other ones popping up in Deerfield for younger classes. I just want you to be aware that that's going on, just so you kind of know about it. Sorry.
My name is Jim Page, live on South Road. When did the board last meet with the architects and engineers and review the numbers that you showed us here for the total cost of the project? Has that been recent in the last couple months?
So the board's been meeting basically every 2 weeks with the architects, the building subcommittee's been meeting every 2 weeks with the architects. Basically, the day of our board meetings, the building subcommittee's been holding their meetings prior to our board meetings.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, to be right up front, the numbers that you put on the board are those 2019, 20, 21, the first part of 22. What are we looking at here?
The numbers, we worked with the local construction manager to provide numbers. We actually met with several subcontractors. We asked everybody to look at our bid window that we're promoting right now, which is about a year from now. So February 2023. That's the numbers that we're predicting based on all the input we got. as noted, we did carry some heavy escalations there in case the market goes up. What we're predicting is around an 8% increase in material costs, but that's past what the numbers we already have. So we carried another 10% on top of anything they gave us, and we did carry contingencies as well.
Well, I heard the phrase used here, a guaranteed maximum price. That's what everybody hopes for. That's what every school board, every architect hopes for. That a contract comes in, plunks a number down and says, this is my maximum price. I really don't think you're going to get that in the industry now. Before 2023, it's not even realistic. Numbers are all over the place out here. Now, I'll give an example. I'm looking at some new school buildings here, and you've got flat roof systems. So you're going to build a new building with a flat roof. Okay, the designer, the engineer, the architect, structural designer decides that the cheapest way for that building to be built is a bar joist system. So that's the way it goes out for bid. Okay, all of a sudden, the contractor comes back after the guaranteed maximum price has been signed for and everything and says, we're sorry here, it can't be done. Because the industry right now, bar joist right now, if you had a bar joist job, they're out almost a year to find one, find a manufacturer anywhere between Canada and the US. Okay, so now what you gotta do, you gotta drop back, you gotta bring your engineers aboard again, you gotta redesign the entire building, you gotta go to a beam system, you gotta find the materials, and there isn't a contract, or worse still, contractors would like to guarantee the price, but you can't find the suppliers to guarantee the numbers. Right here, these ceiling tiles, 200+% increase in the last few months. Almost $3 a square foot for this stuff. Okay, windows, a year out. Rubber roofs, you can get the rubber, but you can't get the insulation, you can't get the tapered insulation to build. There's state projects right now that are canceled out there. They're put off indefinite time frame. You can get a building up and end up boarding up the windows. I have a project myself going on, and we may have to board windows. And so it's the entire market right now is completely pervaded with it. And it's the material suppliers that are driving it. You can't get insulation. And then when you get it, you're going to get, the contractor is going to get a number from a supplier. And the big supplier is going to say, what they're doing right now, they're saying, we can get it, and you want it on September 1, we can get it in February of 2023, but the number you're going to pay is February of 2023 when it's shipped to you. So I don't know how the board and others are prepared to deal with this. If contingencies in there, things look pretty light. And how is the board going to deal when the number comes in and there's one bidder, there's one general contractor, throws a number at the job, 45, 50 million, the bid number comes in at 70, just to start without the escalation numbers. And it's a real problem, and you people will be faced with it. And how you're going to make those decisions when it comes in, I can't tell you. I track stuff, I build stuff, I build high schools, elementary schools, all kinds of commercial things, including heavy stuff, site work. I track the numbers on it all the time. And I can tell you of a project that came in recently that is kicking off not too far from here in a major town. And the numbers were 45 to 50 million. It rolled into the school board with one bidder, $70 million. What are you going to do? So just pass it on. Do your homework, because the numbers that we're dealing with are not the numbers that you think they are.
I'd like to let him respond.
Okay. So excellent points, and it's one of the reasons that the architects actually didn't come up with the numbers on our own. So we looked at our projects, but we looked at a construction manager, similar trade to yourself, go through that. He's already asked us, we've already committed to, we're not going to be using bar joist, for example, he said, and we priced this out with heavy steel beams. That's one of 1,000 examples of feedback that he gave us. What's really important to understand is that in our timeline, this 10 months of design phases, the project's planning to go out through a construction management delivery and a guaranteed maximum price contract. The big advantage the school district sees to that, and the reason that almost all schools in New Hampshire use this contract method, is it puts the construction manager at the table as soon as the design team's at the table. To give us the same feedback you're giving us tonight, to tell us, stay away from bar joists. Is there something else you can do for a ceiling? Would we be better off with drywall ceilings and acoustic coverings versus this?
I understand all of that. I've
So,
been part of it. I've been in construction.
Really appreciate the feedback. We are confident in the numbers. We are committed to these numbers. We're committed to working through that. We believe we've got a great partner. We've used Bond & Page and Stone to be able to provide the estimates up front. We think we've done the due diligence, but as you know, we've got to carry our contingencies and we can only look out as far as we can. We're looking at about a year. So during the next year, we'll continue to monitor that and continue to be part of that. As far as the timelines and the shipping and receiving, more so on our projects right now that we have ongoing. We did recently bid out projects including Oyster River Middle School, Salem Middle School, right on budget despite the pandemic. More so than anything, we're seeing that delay of shipping to the site. One of the nice things of the construction manager process is also we can do early phase release packages. We can actually buy, if we determine that roofing insulation is going to take 12 months to get to the site, we can come in and buy and ship roofing insulation to this site, or to a bonded insured warehouse within this process. Also, if we've seen, there are usually predictors on the market, we're seeing the steel is going to double next month. Should we buy the raw materials? We can work with the building committee and the school board to be able to do that within this process. That's the flexibility we have between now and bid date. That
I understand all of that.
Lance,
Thank you.
Also just mentioned performance bonds as far as.
Yeah, and of course with most public schools, there is a payment and performance bond with a guaranteed maximum price contract. So there is an insured number that makes sure that you can deliver this project for the cost we guarantee. So.
Eric, I live on Pole Road. I have 2 kids that attend DCS. I did as well. You talked about, I believe you used the phrase 3 certified educators would be the addition. What does that mean for support staff and all of that? So when you talk about support staff is sorry about that. So when you talk about support staff, Eric, support staff is driven based strictly on student needs and is independent of the size of the facility or the number of certified staff. So our support staff is drawn from what's called for the student's IEPs. I understand that but I mean, are we going to need to hire another janitor? Are we going to, what is I know you said earlier, even with the heating, electrical, all of that, you can't give us even an estimate of what essentially, I think 38% was the number of square footage growth in this addition. I think you said it's about 38,000 square feet. Okay, I thought I saw 62, so that would leave I don't know, I've looked at a lot of numbers in the last month. I might not look at the wrong number, but so we're currently, I think it was 70,000 square feet-ish right now. Yes. So 38 would be not quite, about 40, somewhere in there. About 114, 120. Okay, so, but if we're adding somewhere in the 30 to 40%, does that mean those costs are gonna go up, heating, cooling, maintenance, all of that stuff? The objective is to build the most efficient envelope that we can to offset, so the increased size will be offset, hopefully with as much efficiencies as we can in the capital system. Okay, but we don't have even a guess. So that a lot of that gets determined in that engineering phase, and that's the next step is figuring out the most efficient way to do everything we can. Okay, and one last question for the architect. So you had said that 45 million and some change was the top number and that's basically because if we give you 45 million to build a school, you don't have any more money. That's what we give you, but we don't actually know what we're going to get for that money.
So a little bit of a clarification on the contractual. You're never going to give me 45 million as much as I would love. The way that works is you're going to engage us to do the architecture, the design, the engineering, the blueprints, get everything bid ready, do the permitting, hire all the engineers. Along that process, we are going to enter into a contract that says that we cannot design anything that costs more than your project budget.
Yes, that's
right?
essentially what I mean.
So we're held and bound to that. You will also be engaging a construction manager under a separate contract. They're going to be the ones responsible for bidding it. They're also going to be the ones providing the estimates along and enter that guaranteed maximum price contract. That contract's directly with the district. They're bound by the same. You could never sign a contract with them for more money than you have by law. So you would set that up in advance, and we'd be working towards that number, together as kind of one big team.
So if we vote on this $45 million based on the rough ideas that we have now, and you said I believe it's about 18% you built in for contingencies and escalation and everything. So if all of a sudden, like multiple projects that we have going on at work, overnight things have jumped 30%, does that mean now that we have to dial back what we originally intended to build to make that happen?
So there's a couple ways to approach that. First, we don't believe it's going to jump 30% past the numbers we have. If it literally doubled overnight, we could easily come back to the community and say we can't do it and cancel the project, and it's over. We've never had to do that. We've always essentially been designing to that number. We believe we built in enough contingency to allow us the flexibility to finalize that design. Now, we don't have a crystal ball, but all we can do is go by every indicator in the market we're seeing and try to predict these numbers. One important part to note too is, I know that contingency sounds high, and we intentionally believe it is higher than the market will bear. The goal is to come under, so we can always be under the 45 million, reduce the amount of the bond, lower the tax rate, and do the same project. There are a lot of decisions to make. Everything from, we're proposing flooring right now that doesn't require more maintenance, doesn't require wax, it's a lower maintenance product. The final decision, if that product starts to skyrocket, then we have to look at other products. We can look at carpet and things like that. But a lot of those decisions get made along the process, and we're constantly running a living number to say, what's the market predict this project cost today? If the market, we're seeing spikes, and historically we're not seeing all trades going 30% up. What we're seeing is steel went way up. Masonry came down. Labor, though, is short, so the schedule. So we're constantly adjusting our design work based on constant feedback from that construction manager. But the answer is no, we cannot go over. We are bound by the 45.5, with the only exception being if someone steps in and wants to make a donation for something that's not being considered. So if somebody's out there and they want to donate $1 million to the project, put a statue out front, we can modify that to that extent only. But you're approving this project at this cost maximum.
Lance, could also, real quick, Derek, if you don't mind. I think it's important to note, here we kind of saw all the back end work that went into getting to a $45.5 million number. It's really easy to see that really nice rendering and just say, oh, that's a nice picture and it's going to cost 45. That's not what happened. We initially hired LBA. We interviewed numerous architects, selected them as our architects, worked with them to get to this design iteration, and when it's time, what we did was we put out RFPs for construction management firms. We got numerous responses. Selected Bonnet Page and Stone, DPS. They've got tons of experience building schools, and they are qualified beyond all means to do this project. Then what happened is Bonnet Page and Stone worked with LBA for probably hundreds of hours, going back and forth saying, what do you guys see for this wall system? How's this wall system going to be built? What are we seeing perform? What about casework? They went through and created line item budgets with LBA based on those plans. We're at the conceptual stage. We couldn't get permitting off of these plan sets, but they have enough historical data and enough experience to look at what they've spent in the past on numbers for projects like this. They were able to talk to all their suppliers that they work with, whether it's steel, whether it's the framing subcontractors, X, Y, and Z, to develop these numbers. So it's not like LBA just reached out, pulled the number out of the hat. They worked hand in hand with the construction management firm to develop these numbers. So while it can sound scary, and yes, we're in a volatile time in construction, but like Lance said, Yes, construction materials are increasing. We constantly get the emails every day. That's going up 10%, blah, 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 blah. But it's important to keep in mind that material costs, it's not labor costs. And in these numbers, we're all very confident based on Bennett Page and Stone's history, LBA's history, that we've got an adequate buffer in here.
Okay, it just seems like you're asking us to sign a contract to build a house, but you can't tell me what kitchen I'm getting, what flooring I'm getting. You're telling me what it's gonna cost me, but we're gonna solve all that based on how much money we have later.
Yeah, and that's a good question and a good point. The difference is between building a house and building a school is that to get to that point where I could say, this is what you're gonna have for a walls, exact wall system, this is what you're gonna for a window package, this is who's gonna make it, this is what you're getting for your ceiling tiles, your flooring, your hardware sets, all that. We're talking millions of dollars in engineering, structural design, permitting process. So it's not like we can just pay them $100,000, $200,000 and get to that point, right? It's a very involved process. So this is the way that we need to get the school built, is to take it as far as we take it with the conceptuals, develop a budget that we're all very confident and stand behind. But yeah, it is different than I'm going to build your house and you'll be happy when you show up and you're going to like it, I promise.
That's kind of how I'm feeling here.
Yep. No, but I hope you can understand why that difference is, just because the amount of investment.
Well, I understand, yeah, building a school is a lot different than a house, but.
Yeah, the plan set's going to be 200 plus pages, you know, the spec book's 1,000 pages, and I've never built a school, but 1,000 pages, and the specs book is going to be this thick.
Oh, yeah, right. And then one kind of just out there question, because why not? But has anybody done any thought process research into, I believe earlier was discussed that roughly we're all on average talking about $1,000 a year tax increase to build this school. It's going to fluctuate as the bonds rise and fall. Has anybody thought about some of our retired fixed income, that kind of stuff, that might not be able to afford to stay in town? And then a lot of those older farmhouses, I know my mother's house, for instance, her house is a perfect 4-bedroom house for a family of 5 to move into. That's going to create further net gain on our tax. I admit I'm a tax burden on the town. The money I pay the town does not even educate the 2 kids I have that attend DCS. So if we take a lot of those houses that don't provide a lot of draw on the town and price them out of town and encourage more families to move north into our community that bring more kids, more burden on the town, is that going to continue to hurt the town by taking that $1,000, but now we've added more kids and we outgrow the building? Then we have to add more, then we have to raise tax, and it just creates that never-ending problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great hypothetical. And so as far as your first question, you know, is the consideration of the burden on the retired people, the single people. Yeah, we've all given that personally a lot of, you know, consideration. I know I can. It's not a cheap project. I don't want to see my taxes go up. They're going to go up. But this town hasn't invested in itself in essentially 30 years when we built this building. I went here, you went here, we did this addition. It's time for this town to invest in itself and improve the school. We know we need to do that. The town recognized the need for that years ago when we approved the $250,000 for the study. So we have to take that as our starting point and kind of our base factor. We know it's a need. It's not a want, and go from there. As far as your second question about, are we going to force people out of town in which other people will move into town, bringing more students, more kids, increasing the tax burden? It's certainly a possibility, but it's not one in which I think we can base our decision-making skills, right, off of hypotheticals. While it's a valid hypothetical, I'm not knocking you for it at all. We have the fact that we know we need new space, and that is going to cost money, which could potentially drive people out of town. Those are all very realistic hypotheticals. Driving up the burden on the tax base, you know, who's to say? You know, probably 2 months ago in a meeting, you know, Nate brought up a similar question, actually, now that I think about it. And I think my response to him was, you know, what a great or I think it was that, you know, having this school would encourage people to move to town, you know, increase increasing it. But my response to him then was, you know, what a great problem to have that we've got a town that has a school that's so great that people want to move here, right? So absolutely there's some cons to it and some thoughts to consider. I don't know how we could plan for it, but I'd say that, you know, the overall problem having a school in a town that people want to move to and live in reflects very positively on us.
And I will fully admit, we do need to do something. It just seems we've gone from we built this building and then we did this addition, and then we've done nothing for the last 20 years, and now we're going from nothing to the moon. I think that we need to try to find something in the middle that can be affordable, because honestly, we've priced, I mean, I grew up in this town, I've lived here for going on 30 years, and the majority of the kids I went to school with don't live in this town because they can't afford to live in this town.
It's a valid point. But I would also say, you know, when we're thinking about trying to maybe downsize is what I mean, right? Downsize the scope of the project price tag. But we need to think about this price tag is really two-tiered, right? We have the school renovations itself, which this building needs to be updated. Our VCT is cracking. It's 30 years old. That's about $15 million of the project, right? Depending how we delay it, escalation, all that, we're looking somewhere at 12.6 to 20 million. We then have the addition, which is at about another 30 million. So 15 for here, 30 million for there. You know, trying to scale down and potentially undersize the addition and have the same problem now 10 years from now, population growth continues to grow, we're going to be sitting in this room a little more gray than we are today, having the same discussion. The Building Expansion Committee, you know, talked about this a lot. LBA presented us, I think, 4 or 5 different options. And we really went back and forth on the pros and cons of trying to right size this and looking at the population projections that have been created in 2018. And ultimately, after numerous meetings, this is what we decided on. Knowing that, yes, it was a big ask from the town, but what everybody on that committee unanimously felt was best for the town at this point.
And this is really, should be, it needs to be a generational solution. So this is something the community shouldn't have to touch on for 30 plus years. And as Jeff alluded to do this project, you're gonna have to revisit this in 10 years, revisit it again in another 15 years. That was something I've been fairly vocal about. For 5 years, the school board's been talking about the space needs of this facility. It's something I've been very vocal about. I don't want to build something and then have it the wrong size, or build 4 classrooms and when we really needed 8. So I want a solution that is done and dealt with. I don't want to revisit this. I want a long-term solution that's going to fit any potential growth the town can have, and I want it to be generational. I don't want to deal with this again. Oh, and I fully understand that. I mean, the 20-year modulars were a temporary solution back when I was here, you know, 3rd, 4th grade. I want nothing more than to see those things fall out of here, but I have a sneaky suspicion they'll probably leave in the dumpster when we're done with it. They were only going to be here for a year or 2, and then we were going to build an addition. But I just was interested in, you know, if we had talked about possibly building, but not fitting out the upstairs at this time, adding space now, building it as a 2-story, not fitting the upstairs to save costs now, to try to help soften the burden on the town, and as we need the space. I understand that we need space. I kind of have a hard time understanding why we need to, grow by 30 to 40% of the space of the school overnight. Yeah, I mean, I certainly, and again, when we think of the residential world, sometimes that's the way you do it, right? You build a 2,000 square foot house, you only finish off 1,000 square feet, you go back to it 5 or 10 years because you've had a couple of kids and life circumstances have changed. The difference being there is, we'd be looking at an additional bond and to go after this all over again. We'd be going back to this process. The potential would be that you would never finish that 2nd story and you would just let it rot. So, to me, again, a solution is do it, deal with it, address it in its entirety. The approach that we're taking with renovating this building and this structure, refitting this structure, and putting the addition on is to create a completely new educational space, bringing this building back to the structure. So the bones here are good. This building was built to last through anything and everything. It is a concrete bunker. But that still doesn't mean we don't have to replace aging mechanical systems inside. So the approach is going to be is that when we're done this, everything's been taken care of, and we have created this gigantic window for the community that we're not necessarily having to come back to quite some time.
One last question, then I'll stop bothering everybody. Just popped into my head. So, in this growth plan, the addition, everything else, what is the capacity increase of this facility going to be?
So I think comfortably we're figuring to low. Four classrooms. It's 3.5. It's figured it's 3.5 classrooms per grade level, so that we can flow the class through for the larger classrooms.
Okay.
But student capacity overall would comfortably be around 750.
80 additional kids.
Right now we have 498 students.
So we have approximately 500 now.
We're
We're going to be going to about 750.
I think that's
720, I believe.
720.
720.
About 720, which would be a fairly sizable growth.
And there's 50%. Yeah. And all that's going to be done with only 3 more staff members.
Yes.
Okay.
I want to be clear about that growth capacity. So right now you have 3 classrooms per grade level based on your numbers. But unfortunately, kids don't arrive here in groups of 24. So if you have more than 48 kids and you want a 24 student class size, when you hit that 50th kid, 49th kid, you need the 3rd class. Right now, some of the growth capacity exists in just 3 classrooms per grade, because every classroom, some classrooms are full, some are not 100% full. So we have some growth capacity in just designing for 3 classrooms. And when we started looking at this, one of the things that we worked with the committee on is, should we build 3 classrooms per grade? And they said, you know what, we already have one grade that has 4 in it, and it had to come up through the system. And if you're telling us we can't take the kindergarten and put them on the upper floor of the 1st grade when they hit that bubble, then we need at least an extra classroom on the 1st floor, an extra classroom on the upper floor. When we ultimately went through it, as Zach noted, they kept pushing and saying, whatever solution you create has to have enough flexibility in it that during the life of the bond, we're never going to go back to the taxpayers and say we need a little bit more space.
Can I just piggyback off of that? So where do you figure that many more students are going to come from? Like, are you guys planning on the town to develop that much more over this period of time?
So there's the capacity issue versus the expectations. What we wanted to do was be able to have enough capacity that any one grade level could have 4 classes in it. We weren't planning to have 4 classrooms in every grade level, because that would be a growth that I don't think your population predictions would predict. We wanted enough flexibility that you could have 3.5 classrooms per grade instead of the currently 3 plus 1 that you have counting the portables. So although the building would not need an addition until you get to about 720 kids, we don't anticipate it having 720 kids in it in the near future. We just want that flexibility for those bubble years to go through without us saying every year, one group of 1st graders is going to have to go to this other building. We don't dislocate 1 4th grade. So that flexibility is really those extra 3 classrooms. So if you look at it in that terms, you built 3 extra classrooms, you could potentially have an extra 60, 70 kids, but you're really not going to need an addition until you get up over the 700 number.
Well, I understand that, but even during the bubble years, the enrollment has never been over 600 kids in the entire school. So why are we planning for 720, 750, whatever that number was?
We're looking 30 years into the future.
Because we're looking, ultimately, they asked us to look 30 years into the future to grade those bubble years into the worst case scenario to have a bubble every other year. Right now we're seeing a bubble every 6 years. And they say, what if it got to a point where every 2 years? And that's what we had essentially designed to.
Right, but do you think the town's really going to develop that much to have 750 kids in the school?
Yes.
Because that goes back to people being run out of town because they can't afford the taxes, because we're those people.
So this town has grown consistently over the years, and like every community as the spread works from Manchester and it swells out, and the spread works from Concord and it swells out, communities are growing, and they grow from their proximity to their larger cities, in our case Manchester and Concord, and they swell and they grow up. So Deerfield has ample capacity to continue to grow. zoning can impact that. So depending upon how zoning is affecting it, it can have an impact on that. But we certainly have in Deerfield the ability to be built out well beyond our current size.
But do you think that it'll get to that size?
I believe the town will continue to grow as it has for the last 30 years. Okay.
Going for the fastest question I've ever asked from live meeting house hill. On the proposal, is that just literally 2 levels of ground floor and the top floor, no basement?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
You usually challenge us more than that.
You've had enough of me.
Yes, please.
I just, is this on?
I turned it off.
Okay. Candy Davitt, I work in the front office, and I just want to explain that when I first moved to New Hampshire, the Golden Triangle was Salem, Manchester, and Nashua. I lived in Pelham. We wanted to look for a more rural area. We moved to Deerfield. But in looking at Deerfield, we looked at 101. 101? 101. My husband can go down to Boston. He can go to Portsmouth. He can go to Nashua. No matter how you vote on this project, I'm not saying to vote in favor or against. Just understand that the Golden Triangle now is Concord, Manchester, and Portsmouth. And when people come and move into this area, they talk about, and we used to say, who would move to Deerfield because how do you get there from here? They're now looking at it as, I can get anywhere by living in Deerfield. I just want you to put that perspective as you're looking at the town that we all love. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the folks here? Ms. St. Peter? Are these the online questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I need a microphone?
Please.
Yes.
We make everybody do it, we should thank you.
All right. I'm not loud enough.
Yeah.
So, there are a couple of questions online. A lot of them got answered, as we were going along. One of them that I don't think has got answered, I'm sorry if it did. How much is the total dollar amount projected to be accounting for the bond interest over the years? That was asked by Don Messina.
Do we have the table?
I don't have it with me. It's online. Someone can pull it up.
I had it at the deliberative session, and I gave it back to our business administrator, but we can give Jeff a second, I think he might try to dig it up. So if we want to roll through some other questions, we'll try to check it out.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Rose.
$68,850,000 for A and B.
Thank you. That's for A and B?
That was about what I was thinking, but I didn't want to be wrong, but thank you, Mr. Rose.
Jokes. If all of the available grants were received, what is the max dollar amount? That was asked by Rebecca Fisher.
30%.
So 30% would be the max that we would qualify for.
And
If the state continues to fund the building aid and we qualify for the fund.
1 and 2 or just 1?
Just one.
Just one.
okay. And she also wanted to know, has a separate kindergarten through 3rd grade school elsewhere been considered?
So the building committee, and Jeff, I can probably defer you on this, but that was a big part of the conversation to begin with, but the sense was that we wanted to keep all the students here on one site and really kind of continue what makes us unique as being a K-2 school. Plus there's additional administration and other costs that would go into the building and facility.
I think that's all I had. Thanks.
That was easy.
Oh, Jeff's got one.
Hi, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Green again for giving us a tour of the building prior to this. I'll be posting videos online and photos for anybody that couldn't make it to the school today. But I am Jacqueline Schimmer from San Diego Road, and I'm asking a question on behalf of staff
Sarah Jean Chaplin. I know that this was talked about during the deliberative session, but again, for everybody that's here now, what is the plan if this doesn't pass? And also if the warrant article that was amended during the deliberative session, last or on Saturday, what if that doesn't pass? What's the plan?
So I think it's going to be consistent with what we've been doing for a number of years, because we will continue to make work whatever we can, how we can, and we'll continue to work what we have. Obviously, the objective is we know we need more space, and we will continue to support it.
I just had one more question based on a comment earlier about the timeline on the grant approvals. So if this potentially fails, based on what you guys were saying earlier, we could still apply for state aid and then run it through next year again, knowing more or less what we would be getting from the state potentially, correct?
Yeah, we have second opportunity to still hit this biennium next March.
But in order to apply for state aid, we need an approved bond. So,
correct.
So no, we can't, to answer your question, no, we couldn't apply for the state aid if this fails. We need a warrant article that pass supporting the bond, then we can apply for state aid.
Okay, that
You
was
can still apply, you can't receive it.
Oh, my apologies.
okay. So we could still apply, but we couldn't get the money in hand till we approve it.
So we can still, to go over, we can still apply, if we fail this year, we have the ability to pass next year, we have the ability to apply and then pass next year. If we don't pass next year, your application withdrawn. One worthy note, some of our funding during the design phase is going towards developing the plans further to enhance our application. So if this fails and we don't have further designs, we'll essentially be submitting what we have now. So it won't strengthen our application. So one of the reasons we wanted to go this year was so that we had from March until July to continue to fill out that application, make our engineering decisions, commit to some of the sustainable features that we conceptualized already, and have a better application in. But we can, if we fail this year, we have one more crack at it. The application will have already gone in before we know, so we would be looking at, it has to be a similar project. Like I said, we can't send an application in for this project and then next March vote on just doing half the project. Our application would be invalid to the state.
Right, that makes sense. So on that note, you're saying develop the plan more. On the 250 grand that we approved on the warrant a couple of years ago for this work, how much of that has been used and how much will be remaining to flesh this out potentially if this is a fail?
I don't have that exact number. I know that there's money remaining, and we can look at that, but I would need to go through it.
Well, the engineering is going to far exceed the 250K anyway.
Can you talk about?
How much they spent?
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, if you know. Yeah.
So, John, roughly, we've spent of the 250,000, and don't quote me on this. This is sorry. It's on Facebook. I don't have all the invoices in front of me, so I apologize. Plus, we have to do fire alarm work and things like that. But let's say rough numbers, we've spent somewhere between 100 and 120, and that includes the construction manager generating their estimate for us as well.
So if this fails, would that remaining pot be still usable by you guys to flesh this out more, or is that what happens to that money?
That pot, I don't think is large enough remotely for us to flesh out the engineering side.
Yeah. Right, I get that, but more so than what we've got, right? Like, because we've spent a decent amount.
Continue some work, but it isn't going to allow us to get into heavy engineering, permitting, and all that.
Right, which I get, but it would be able to improve the application at least a little bit.
Not to the point where I think we're going to score better because of it.
The answer is we would have some money to make the application better. Not nearly as much in this phase. I mean, we're going to be full engineering team, doing energy modeling, that kind of stuff, where we can put that in the application. So obviously, I think everybody be committed to doing what we can for the application. We're not going to say no, we're not doing it. in this scenario, we're gonna have a better application if they pass this year. It's one of the reasons we wanted to put it forward in the first year of the biennium versus the second year of the biennium.
Right, that makes 100% sense. I just was asking about that.
Along the same lines, Harold Road Street. One fails, 2 goes away, 3, we don't know what happens, 4 passes. Will you be using those funds to do this work?
No, so that fund is, so that fund is, the Article 4 is tied to an independent trust fund, and that fund only has certain purposes, it would be for the repair of this. Is there any additional questions from anybody that's here?
I just
Sure.
like to make a comment. My name is Jim Eames. Oh, I'm sorry.
If you don't mind, because I think we actually have people watching at home, listening at home.
Just a comment. The comments, it's on. If you could release just some information about the student population, that would help me a lot. I didn't read any of that in the websites. I know you said it's difficult with the pandemic and things, but I think what are some of those projections for demographics really has a big impact in terms of what to expect over at least the next 5 years. I know it's hard to project out more than 5 years, but it would just help me better make a decision on this. And then my other question, is there any consideration to revenue, on the revenue side, in terms of these open spaces? What kind of revenue could be generated by the use of those spaces?
So we have some updated demographic stuff that we're gonna be putting out shortly. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, we only have that up to 2019 in the state, so our data stream falls short at 2019, but we do have some data the board's gonna be reviewing and then putting out as far as demographic and potential goes. So as far as the revenue side of it goes, there's nothing that we've gotten into yet. There isn't a ton of revenue generating options in schools. So nothing that I can conceivably see that will offset anything to that extent.
I have some numbers regarding this on.
Yep. Yeah.
The recent last 5 years, the enrollments have been 17, 18, 515, then 541, 531. During COVID, it went down to 498, but that was without pre-K, which is usually 40, which would have been 538. And then this year it's 522. In the upper 2 grades, there's been a 10% decrease from last year to this year. There are children that have opted out to either homeschool or go elsewhere. And the bubble, there is a bubble situation that goes through. In 1819, there was a class that had 69 in it. I don't know which was ranked in the 5th grade. At this point, that same grade, coming through, is down to 61. I don't know if they go to private schools. We hear that pods are happening. I don't know that any demographics are taking into account the change in education. Education is going to be offered differently, I believe, in the future. So I don't know that we need to build for 700. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, well, in that case, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know this is it's getting a little late, and I appreciate it. The board is going to be continuing with our meeting.
Let's sell it for the letter. Maybe he makes an announcement and says that
Otherwise,
first.
thank you very much.
You know what I mean? And let it sell down and we'll see what happens. Sure.
Oh, we ate before we ate. You did not get anything?
Cottage cheese and fruit. Oh, that's stupid. Some school boards have very good food.
Timberlane always has like fresh fruit made out that they're like every time I go there, I'm like,
You should tell Zach that. We used to get pizza.
I know, but everybody wants to know short answer, right? Wait, don't you pass any meals?
You're behind me in the morning.
No.
This represents so 300 families. I know. 100 families. So for 500 kids, we're 300 families.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, I don't know. She actually used tallies and maybe some
My shirt. Tell both our wives. I can say that. Juju, are you ready? You have an early morning appointment? You have an early morning appointment? DJ, please. All right. Okay. So we're gonna get back to it, folks. I'm gonna ask for the board's consent to lighten up the agenda some.
Yep.
We're gonna move policies to the next meeting.
Yep.
We're gonna remove the board reports except the building expansion committee because Judy wanted to get into something real quick. But as far as the rest of the board reports, we're gonna push to the next meeting. That's okay?
Yeah. I would like to get into something at some, yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna leave the expansion committee on. That's the only one we're gonna leave. And then for immediate business, we are going to table E and F. So correspondence, we will review at the next meeting. And then F, the extension for transportation, we'll discuss at the next meeting. That's probably going to become a long conversation. Is that all okay for the board members?
Yes.
Okay. We do have to go back into non-public at some point, so we want to get rolling here. So next up, and thank you for everybody that attended tonight. It's really appreciated. We have 2 consent items. Did everybody have a chance to review the staff requests?
Yes.
Another one that put in this afternoon.
Okay. Do we need to hold this, or does the rest of the board see the other requests?
I saw them both.
All right.
If you want to go public anyway, you want to talk there or?
They seem pretty cut and dry.
Okay.
I accept the motion if we made a motion. If we don't make a motion, then they can wait.
I make a motion to approve the staff requests.
I have a second.
Second.
Okay. Additional, there really can't be any discussion at this point. So I look for.
Can we have 1 second?
Oh, certainly. All right, and I do want to make sure also Andy's dialing in. Is Andy? Sorry. I just want to make sure we get Andy in. Miss Whitty? Andy?
I'm so hungry.
Yeah.
Coming.
We just gotta get Andy in.
Oh, got it.
All right. So, can you get Andy in, Miss Whitty?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we'll let Andy catch up. But hey, it's good. So we have a motion in a second to approve the staff request. All in favor?
Yeah, it's extra. Like it's like 3 extra pages today.
Okay, you know Andy, I just think.
Well, are we approving both of them at the same time? No.
No. Okay. So it's 3-1. Andy isn't in yet, but
I gave him this sheet.
Oh, you already gave him out.
all right, we
I'm
have
sorry.
2
Okay. You gave
invoices
those.
from Dale. I didn't give them out. All right, we have an invoice from Dale for January transportation for Concord High School, 2 buses, 18 days, totaling $14,046.84. What's the wish of the board?
Move to approve them.
All right. Second. We have a motion by Gigi, seconded by Nate. Additional discussion by Jeff. I'm sorry.
Andy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How's my audio on your side?
Sounds great.
Sounds wonderful, Andy. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for patiently waiting. All right, so we have a motion to approve additional discussion regarding the high school invoice. Yep. All right. So all in favor? Now that Andy's in, I am going to have to do these as a roll call. Correct. All right. So Nate. Gigi.
Aye.
Jeff. Andy. Approval of the high school transportation invoice.
Aye.
Aye. That's an aye from me. All right. Next up, we have the January invoice from Dale for the DCS buses. 6 buses, 17 days, $35,113.50. What is the wish of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Gigi. Discussion regarding the invoice. All in favor? So, sorry, roll call. Nate. Gigi.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Andy.
Aye.
Okay, that takes care of the transportation. Did you vote? Oh, yes. Sorry. Okay. Hold. That brings us to the school calendar. We have a calendar. We have a calendar.
So the calendar is modeled after the calendar this year, and Brian did a lot of work meeting with staff
talking about the various days that we take off in a typical year. I think one of the changes that a lot of our districts in the SAU are making and staff were interested in doing here is starting the week before. So the staff would actually come back the 22nd and the 23rd of August. Students would start Wednesday the 24th. Well, that puts you out at June 13th. So if you went a week after, that would push out the end of school, obviously further out. Parent conferences are still set up the same. Concord vacations match what's on here. I don't think there was anything else different, was there, Brian?
No, I mean, we have the Deerfield Fair, obviously.
Yeah, same as any other typical year. And
right.
Then,
and we did start this year. This year was the 23rd and 24th for in-service, and then the students started on the 25th. So we're only off by one day this year.
Same. I think Concord starts a little bit later, but they only have 170.
They have 177, and they have less. They like you take
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
very similar.
Questions regarding the calendar?
Yeah.
Nate, go ahead.
Patty, you mentioned the parent conferences are happening the same way.
Yes.
I found this year that scheduling, they were remote this year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They were remote this year. And I still wonder, I appreciated that, but I do still wonder about parents who have to work during the day and are not able to attend and get time to Zoom into a meeting or something like that. Have you had, as parents or as administration, have you had much consideration given to the idea of sort of a more equitable schedule, which would allow for to come in the evening or something like that, and they can fit that in their schedule? And how does that work?
That would be Kristen and Brian question.
We've actually this year we've seen a significant increase in the amount of people who did participate in it because it was you were able to like take time out of your lunch at work and not have to. So you kind of built you built that into your schedule. So we've seen a huge impact on Zooming in or Google Meet or whatever device they're using.
So we've talked to our staff about offering that in the future as an option, in person or remote, or on Google Meet or whatever. Mm-hmm.
And teams do make, or teachers do make accommodations.
They do.
If a parent obviously cannot make it, they've always been flexible in the entire time I've been here. So
what we don't want to go back to is the 2-3 weeks of conferences, morning, noon, night, afternoon, lunch, planning periods. It was so much for teachers to manage all of that. Mm-hmm. And having it's on the calendar. Parents know ahead of time when it's coming. You know when the days are, and we make it. Parents have made it work. And like Brian said, if there's the parent who needs before school or an after school or something different, teachers can be flexible with that.
Yeah, that's good. Good news. There was a big spike this year. That's great. Excellent. Okay.
Any additional questions?
One other one was what we're looking at with this February break. I'm the only person in I don't actually be the only one, but my family is split between different. So it seems like the eastern half, the seacoast of New Hampshire, the seacoast of New Hampshire is all next week, and then here we are the week after.
Same next year.
So can you speak to why is that, and why would we not change?
We have. We're only because it's only because of Dover. It's a career tech school for the high school. So so we are going by what we don't know why other schools are going against the DOE. So DOE comes out with their recommendation, and Concord went with that. We're going with Concord, obviously, because that's our sending school. For the life of me, I have no clue why schools on the seacoast, and it's predominantly just 3 major towns on the seacoast region that are bulking that and going with Massachusetts week. Yeah, which is silly because that means longer lines at the ski slopes. So, but looking out after next year, February becomes almost a full week again in 24. So it's a leap year in 24. So it goes, I think Friday is the 29th, Thursday or Friday. So you're going to have, it goes back to that kind of like that normal last full week of February. So, but yes, there's a lot. We have quite a few staff members in the building in the same situation as us. We're split. Yep.
Great. Why not?
So do we need to act on this tonight, or is
That
it
would be
something?
great.
It would be, so we get it published?
There's not a lot of differences.
Make a motion to approve the calendar as presented.
So moved by Jeff, seconded by Gigi. Is there any additional discussion? Are we ready to vote? Okay, Nate?
Yeah, aye.
Gigi?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Andy, you in there?
Aye.
Andy, he's like a pirate over there. All right, then that's an aye from me. Calendar is approved. All right.
You should see my eye patch.
All right, we have the revote on Article 4. So I guess it would be Jeff and Andy that didn't have the pleasure of being at the deliberative session. Article 4 was amended. You have to
It's.
There you go. Thank you. So Article 4 was amended at the deliberative session. So we have, the board is entitled to update our recommendation. So I'm going to read the article and then we can discuss it and re-vote on what our recommendation can be. So Article 4 currently, for now, as amended, reads, shall the Deerfield School District, if Article 1 fails, vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1 million from the June 30th, 2022 unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2022. Be added to the school building repair trust fund with the balance to be raised from taxation for the purpose of school building repair at Deerfield Community School. The article is contingent upon the failure of Article 1. If Article 1 passes, this warrant article shall not take effect. A majority vote is required. So the original article was for $400,000 to be taken from the fund balance if available. This current article would fund whatever is available in the fund balance, plus the balance to get to that $1 million mark will be raised from taxation. The MBC met last night and voted 5-3 in support. I do.
Voted against it.
I do.
Who voted against it?
Myself, Terry Roy, and I believe Bill Von Hassel, but please don't hold me to that. But the count was 5-3. I will repeat what I said last night because it has already been misconstrued elsewhere in the community, on Facebook, ironically enough. So I was asked by the MBC if I would support it. My response to the MBC is that as a board member, I would not support that article as amended. I felt without the $1 million would be better applied to bond service for us to fully remedy our deficiencies. So I wouldn't recommend it. However, I would be voting for it at the ballot box. Is how I would be treating that particular article. So I will vote the same way tonight for consistency's sake. But the board is entitled to make their own recommendations. So I would look for yay or nays from the board members or additional discussion. Questions? Go ahead.
So I guess my concern is that now that this number's gone up so much, this is going to be less likely to pass the ballot box, which is a concern in the deliberative session was being discussed. My question, I guess, and this is getting more at what you just said, Zach, about why you said what you said. The argument at the deliberative session was that we could use this $1 million to dig into a bigger project. And I think the speaker was arguing that with this approach, we could break the $45 million up into, or the $20 million of the renovation of this building into smaller bite-sized chunks that could be done more cost effectively. Do you, as the chair of the committee that looked at the building situation, do you feel like there's anything we could, if we had, let's say this passed, and let's say this summer we had $1 million new dollars to spend, is there, I mean, we know that we need to do the fire situation because that's, but is there another, replacing the roof? I mean, that would cost $1 million, a little bit under. Is that something, if this passes, we could do without derailing the project that Zach was referring to?
So there's I have two answers for you. The first one is, in a nutshell, yes, theoretically, we could potentially do the roof, but we could be taking a step back and undoing work later if and when we make other renovations to the building. Air top roof handling units, all those penetrations. We're gonna be essentially put on the finish layer and then rip it back open to do work later down the road. So it's kind of putting the cart before the horse with a lot of these projects. The other issue is none of us are qualified, I'm certainly not, to say we could do this window project for $1 million. The only way we're gonna know that is if we spend $30,000 on the engineers to come through, spec out all the windows, how that's gonna happen. Then we find out, oh, you know, that's $1.1 million, right? So in order to, and then the second part answer to your question is, the way I read this fund is the building repair trust fund. So would we even be able to utilize that 1 million to develop the full set of plans and specs that we need for these bigger projects? It's a building repair trust fund. It's not a capital improvement trust fund. So the theory in putting the 400,000 in there is, all right, we need, if we have to put a big Band-Aid on something, the 400,000 is going to help us with that big Band-Aid. We're underfunded. Oops. But now we're at this position where we're going to have all this money in here for potential problems, but it's not allowing us to address, as I understand how the trust fund is used, to not really attack those capital improvement projects. Would we be able to go to the trustees and say, hey, we need to replace these windows because we can get better windows? They're still working. They're failing, you know, but that's an argument I don't know if we can make. So, but on the same hand, voting no against this kind of sends the wrong message. Zach's already being misconstrued all over social media.
Well, that happens to me on a daily basis.
Easy enough to happen to you. It sends a message that we're not able to clarify with all the people in the public when they say, oh, they're complaining that the building hasn't been repaired and taken care of, and then we reject $1 million potentially for it. So it's a bit of a quagmire, which is why I'm probably going to support it, because of the misunderstanding of the community and the inability to communicate what I just said effectively to the town.
Go ahead. What if it fails? And as proposed at the deliberative session, let's say we have at the end of the budget year, and we can foresee this in March when it fails, that we have $400,000 in surplus, which then, because it fails, we can't move into a trust fund. It basically gets sent back as of June 30th, right? So if we have a surplus, that gets sent back.
We can spend unbalanced dollars.
That's my question. My question is then, could we have a $400,000 project lined up in time if this fails to spend it before it goes back to June 30th?
Yes. You just need to have someone under contract. You don't have to work completed.
That's so amorphous though, because
so I do want to point out a glaring inconsistency. So that argument was brought forth to us. So the one time this board did a project using surplus funds, we addressed an immediate need, which was to get stuff out of this building into another building to clear fire access so that we had better egress in this building and to give us a place to store stuff. And 5 years later, people are still complaining that we spent $80,000 on the storage facility. So although it sounds great in theory, the one time this board undertook a project like that and addressed an immediate glaring need, which is to get stuff out of the building and free up space, a handful of people in this community still, and some of them recommended we do this now moving forward at the deliberative session, the same people that have been lambasting us for a number of years for doing exactly that.
Right.
So, you know, there's a contradiction there from a certain group of community members that I think bears to be pointed out. Can we? Yes. It's a bottom line budget, and we have the discretion to spend it as we deem appropriate.
My question was more along the lines of, could we realistically and efficiently and effectively come up with a $400,000 project that would be...
No, the amount of legwork and back-end work.
It wouldn't happen in 3 months.
Plans, specs, bidding.
The big project that's on deck would be the fire alarm device project.
Which we have to do.
Which is realistically where the existing funds are going to be directed from.
We could use the fund balance for that rather than using the repair trust fund, which is what we had previously planned.
Theoretically, yes. And that is something as we're getting our project on deck, we can discuss as we get later in the year.
It's just we haven't
I'll
known
be
that,
here.
we haven't
You
known
stay
that number. We don't know the number.
I'm blaming on your knee.
Yeah, we won't start even getting the forecast on that. Typically it's like May, April, May.
I mean, she's gonna start in the next month or so, but you can't count on that.
Right.
You know, there could still be a swing for the next few months. And we just watch it every meeting starting in the spring and give you updates as we go.
Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not.
Correct.
All right. Gigi, sorry.
Well, I kind of sit in the same kind of seat as Jeff does. I voted against the article at the meeting because I felt like it so oftentimes people just, without a town meeting and without really good information, now that we don't have a town meeting, people just look and go, that will raise my taxes, I'm voting no. And so I feel like, well, then we'd be left with nothing, you know, then there's nothing but to rely on the fund balance. So I had the same worry as you did, Nate, too. You know, you raised up to $1 million and they're like $1 million. But yet at the same time, not to support it seems like, oh, what, you won't support our paltry $1 million that we've offered up to you? So
Again, I'll vote for it at the ballot either way.
Yep.
My concern is that we're creating this sense that $1 million fixes the problem, and $1 million doesn't fix the problem. $1 million potentially puts a Band-Aid on something that doesn't actually address the glaring issues, this building needs to be refit. It's not, it needs, the systems have outlived their useful life, and we will continue to repair them as long as we have to, but the glaring need for the community is that this building needs a refitting. It's time. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
If it wins, and it goes through, and there is $70 million in that trust fund, it does not expire.
No.
Correct. You don't want to hang on to it for 20 years, but I mean, you could hang on to it for 20 years, and then eventually the new building, if it goes through, would need repair. You'd have $1 million with interest, so it wouldn't be worse than.
And further,
we wouldn't have to spend it next year.
I agree with you, and for that reason, I could also I'll probably support it because of the fact that we need to get money in there. We're underfunded right now. Yes, it's a big number. Yes, people might say, "Oh, $1 million is going to fix it," but the reality is we could find ourselves in a very precarious position in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, where something critical fails and we are woefully underfunded. So there's no harm to it. We're all going to support it at the ballot box because we know we need it. It all comes down, unfortunately, to optics, really, right? And messaging.
Well, I've already annoyed everybody, so I'm going to roll with it.
Okay.
All right. Andy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm just going to agree with Jeff. If the community thinks that $1 million is going to reduce the effort, cost, duration of the expansion, then they're poorly informed. And it's a disappointment of all the time and effort that the subcommittee has put into this project, and trying to push this information out to the community on, you know, what is fueling the project. So I guess assuming that the community doesn't think that this $1 million is going to accelerate or move the expansion forward, and it will be for like the fire alarm panel and some of those other, you know, smaller projects. I mean, I'll probably support it in that regard, but if the community is looking at this increase from the 400,000 to the $1 million as, hey, this is going to reduce the cost of the expansion, then I wouldn't want to support it. So I guess I'm a little conflicted because of how the community is going to, you know, I guess interpret how we vote on this.
Well, I can tell you how they interpret how I vote on it. So, all right, are we ready to act on this?
Yep. Yes.
All right, Nate, yay or nay?
Aye.
Gigi.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Andy.
Aye.
And I'm gonna die all alone on my hill. All right. Next up, Daddy, you want to talk about the UHHS guidelines? I put that in your
Thank you.
file. There's the
So as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, February 7th, 2022, we received an update from Division of Public Health. I'm sure Bonnie is so excited that they are now given this is quoted from the guidance, given the increasing use of at-home tests, tracking every COVID infection is neither possible nor necessary for managing the COVID pandemic within our communities and schools. So DHHS is implementing weekly aggregate reporting. So Nurse Bonnie can breathe maybe for a couple of days, a little bit. And we're going to do aggregate reporting at the end of the week. So I would plan, since we've been following the guidelines all along, I would plan for us to follow suit and start reporting weekly to families about how many cases there are, which is what we'll be reporting to DHHS. They're also part of that is that they're not asking us to do contact tracing and clusters and if clusters and outbreaks are suspected, then we can contact DHHS. Bonnie will contact them, report it, and they'll offer us guidance. So if a cluster or an outbreak is in our facility and we want their assistance, they will help us and give us guidance on what we should do to address that cluster or outbreak. So I think it's at this point, their guidance is now reduced down to 3 pages. So they're going to talk about what our implementation and layers of mitigation would be, just as they have all along when we would contact them when we had that original outbreak a while back. They talked us through all of the mitigation strategies, asked what we were currently doing, and then gave suggestions. So that is what I would assume we would be doing going forward. All of our districts in our SAU have gone mask optional with the exception of Pembroke last night. They're in the process of scheduling a meeting next week. They intend to try to schedule a meeting for next week to look at that vote again, to reconsider. Someone that voted against it wants to reconsider. So I'm not sure where that's going to go. And then all the surrounding towns have dropped. Lakes region, we've been keeping a survey going, and as of today, several more districts added to mask optional and using the new DHHS guidelines. So at this point, that is what Deerfield is recommending. I think unless something's changed, Kristen and Brian are on board with that, and Nurse Bonnie is okay with that.
All right, so you're recommending that we transition. Can I use pivot one last time?
Go for it.
You're recommending that we pivot to a mask optional situation.
Correct.
Okay. So that's a recommendation from the superintendent, and it appears that it carries from admin and Nurse Bonnie as well.
Yes, I mean, our numbers have come way down significantly. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and whether we do it now or the true test might be 2 weeks post return from February vacation. If do it now and then we have to return to mass, there's a chance, who knows, but we're close either way.
All right, so I'll take a swing at the apples so we can have a conversation. It sounds like we're being asked to have a conversation. So I will make a motion that DCS revert to a mask optional status on school grounds. Transportation still has to be its own thing based on what we're getting.
And that's a good point. The federal.
All right, so that's my motion.
Second.
My motion is to revert back to a masks optional. Second. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I will add that this is independent of transportation. Transportation still has its own guidelines from DOT. Nothing's changed on.
So March 18th it expires. We've been informed that they will be revisiting that, but no indication has been given that that will change. As of right now, it's being removed March 18th.
Except if we go mask optional, the exception is if somebody's positive and they've done their 5-day quarantine.
They have to.
And they're symptom free, they come back on day 6.
Yeah.
All indoor public places, that's what the guidelines right now are to wear their masks in all indoor places and the school for day 6 through 10. So the teachers, somebody would have to, the child would do that, but they would have to place that.
Which is fine. All right. So let's have a discussion. Let's let this go where it goes. It's on the table. Anybody?
Kristen and Brian, I'm assuming that the staff is on board with that decision.
Yeah, we didn't do any official polling or super simple survey, but
It's hard to say that, isn't it?
it is. I guess, especially at 9:45 at night. But what just talking to people, it's kind of like 60-40, I would say, like in favor of
Teachers there are teachers that will remain with their masks on. I will remain with my mask on to support kids. But other than that, I think a lot of people that both of us have talked to, they're ready for it to be optional.
Okay, and I have another question, Patty, like, the other schools, like, what was the data, or what were they using in order to make that decision?
I think all of these decisions started, two things, stemming from the new guidance, as well as the drop in cases in schools and in our communities. That, some people did graphs, and we did the spike, and now we're doing this. I think there's 6 today. When I looked, there were 6 cases in Deerfield. So we're very close to the 4.
And 3
and a half.
And 3 of them are. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The drop is also due to the fact that a lot of people are doing home testing. Not reporting, but and we're seeing these variant, subvariant weaken, and
This eventually, I'm sure, rolls itself into a pandemic, and it is something that we just have to tolerate to a certain extent.
Students, faculty, community members who are immunocompromised, I'm not sure who's directed at, and who would have to, who even if they get vaccinated, they still have not sort of reached that kind of state. Do we have any numbers on what portion of our community in the school fits that description, and are we putting compromising the health of people who would have to then go remote, or we don't have a remote option, who would have to pull out of school because they can't be here, and that would we have anybody that's in that category?
I know some of those children who are immunocompromised have been vaccinated, and the parents that were with them are, and they possibly would still wear their masks. I'm not sure.
Do you know of any who would have to leave the school because of this change?
No.
They would still be able to come in, be healthy, be safe, with masks on for themselves.
Additional discussion? All right, so seeing none, the only thing I can place my motion was an effective date, which we could amend. Oh, go ahead.
Do we have any students who are too young to get vaccinated? The 5+
For our preschoolers.
We have preschoolers who are too young to get vaccinated.
We do.
Approximately 40.
Approximately 40.
10 per day for 10 in the morning, 10 in the afternoon per session.
Do we have any feel for whether they would still or whether any of them would?
I can't predict any of that. I have no idea.
Well, they certainly have the option, right? So the families that want to, they can still have their kids. For that, the families expressly want their kids wearing a mask, I'm sure the staff will support that.
For sure.
Yeah, but we have seen from the evidence is that that's not really the key part of the mask. The mask is more from us blowing out germs rather than a vulnerable person breathing it.
I think what you're seeing too is in preschool, it's fairly isolated.
Yeah.
They're not interacting. They walk from the lobby to that room, and they go out that side door to go out back. They don't walk around. They're not going to art. They're not walking around the building in that sense.
Some students are isolated from the rest of the school.
Essentially, essentially. I mean, you'll have some kids pass them in the hallway as they come in, but yeah. And looking at photos outside of school, most of these families are interacting without masks anyway.
I think I just want to say for the record that it's important that decisions get made decisions get made when new information comes out. I think that that's important, and I think that we've been accused wrongly of muzzling and masking and personal agendas and things like that. And I just wanted to make it crystal clear that none of that is true, and that this board has worked very, very hard to take the health of all of the citizens of the town into consideration using the best information that we could possibly use, having been put in this god-awful position of legislating health decisions as volunteer members. So I just want to go on record saying that. Thank you.
I haven't heard from you, Andy. I'm assuming you're still in there?
Yeah, I'm still in the box.
Do you have any feedback, Andy, or are you? No.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you had mentioned it, but I was just curious if there was a start date.
I think that is something that will probably be determined momentarily.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Gigi said. I think the biggest, eye opener with Omicron, this is not the Delta variant, it's the Omicron variant. And having been able to watch firsthand it travel through our school, our community, my family, my street, and seeing the very minimal effects on people. Also the hospitalizations and deaths and all of that is new information. And that is the best information that, not the best information, but we don't have a whole lot of information as board members. And so in making this decision, reading the news, seeing what the statistics are doing, and then looking, when you see something, like that you apply to it. Anyways, can't remember the word, it's late, but for me that was eye-opening. Enlightening.
We typically don't hold ourselves responsible for decisions after 9 o'clock.
Thank you. But yeah, I would propose an amendment to your motion that this is effective as of tomorrow.
Well, then just make it immediately so we can take this thing off.
Yeah, effective February 17th.
Sorry, Zach.
You can hang out for 2 hours.
How about effective immediately?
Effective immediately.
Okay. Because I don't think the 2 hours is going to make much of a difference. Okay. All right, so we have a motion to make it effective immediately. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second for discussion.
All right. I'm going to give it to Gigi in a second.
People are going to love that.
Perhaps, or nurse maybe. But if a bunch of people go to, let's say for, are we just not worried about that much anymore over February break? Let's say we get back, would you, or is the state saying anything about putting it back on for 2 weeks after vacation? From what you've heard.
As of Dr. Chan's meeting, normally we have the first and third, it's up to next week. So last week's meeting, nothing had changed. There's nothing travel with masks. They were still saying the state's still in the red, masking is still the best, but we're seeing the numbers come down significantly in a week's time.
There is no travel restrictions. They have not changed.
Travel is, if you are vaccinated, you don't have to go anywhere.
And that's international travel, not the local travel in the United States. There's no restrictions. Right.
If we see numbers go back up, then.
Well, and that's part of what Patty referenced was if we see clusters and we notify the state, we address it with the state, and we take the appropriate measures in that case. But that's if we identify clusters.
Hopefully you wouldn't have people who are glad now children don't have to wear masks and they tested positive on a rapid, doesn't get reported, a home test is reported, and they don't tell us. Because then the more numbers come in, and so I can see both sides.
No, and I certainly, a big part of this, if we do opt to do this, is we still need to stress to people, if you test positive, stay home.
Do the right thing.
Right? Just stay home.
If you have
5
symptoms,
days.
whether you're,
Right? It's just so. Yeah, just take the precautions.
We've been doing for 2 years.
Anybody?
I just wanted to check in about the logistics of making it immediate with the administration.
I'm like, how do I even?
Drafting it, I can tell.
So would you like would you like it to look differently?
I we can't go another week. This is literally
Oh, I
out
thought
of,
you
this
meant
is out of the bag. I know people. What'd you say?
I think you're live streaming, you have all the people in this room, it's gonna spread like wildfire. And I think, that's just my opinion. Kristen, what are you thinking?
I'm literally emailing the staff first. I think they deserve to know first, and then I will send a one call now out immediately after.
I think it would be, I'm waiting. I think it would be really difficult to try and.
You know, we have to go back into non-public. Let's go do that instead. I'm joking.
I don't know. Once the cat's out of the bag, it's going to be a hard enforcement for tomorrow, I think.
Okay, just
to say, yeah, no, that I appreciate the thought.
Additional discussion. Mr. Langworth gets punchy after
this is on the amendment.
We're voting on the amendment. So we're going to vote on the amendment to make it effective immediately. Yeah. All in favor? Roll call. Roll call. Nate. Aye. Gigi.
I abstain.
Jeff. Aye. Andy, are you in there?
I am. Aye.
Okay, myself is aye. So the motion as amended is now on the floor. That would be to make masks optional effective immediately. Is there any more discussion regarding the amended motion? This is Patty's recommendation.
You can put it all on me, yes.
Anything else? All in favor, roll call. Nick, you want to go first or want to do last? Aye. Aye?
I abstain. I just don't have enough information.
Okay. Jeff? Aye. Andy, are you in there?
I am in here. Aye.
Aye and aye. So that's effective immediately. The motion passes.
I don't even know what your face looks like.
It's not
how can you forget that?
I'm the only guy in town that looks better with a mask on.
I slept over, so they still.
All right. Okay. That takes care of the immediate business portion. Building expansion committee, Gigi and Jeff, I believe you had one item you wanted to cover, so why don't we try to take care of that?
Yeah, I just wanted to, obviously you've got a postcard in your mailbox. The other postcard is, I wanted to get some dates from people about when those postcards should go out. We finally got, all the postcards are approved and ready to go out. Postcard 3 and 4, I think went to the printer today. So I just, a couple things. One is that, in order to get the least expensive way to do this, there was a little bit of work involved in that. All of the cards came single, not bundled, so I counted 2,000 cards out into the 4 rural routes that went out. So I just was wondering if we wanted to make a game plan to have a little counting party and maybe get the second one. It won't, if they're all of us, it wouldn't take that long. And then I think that I would like to get the dates down for postcards 3 and 4, and also
Has 2 been printed yet?
2's ready. It's on my dining room table.
Bring them down to my house. We want 2 to go sorted for you tomorrow, and then let's send them Friday.
That's what I figured. I figured you want that Friday. And then 3 and 4, I actually may be away when, and so it may require some logistics because they need to be picked up from the printer, and then of course they need to be paid for, and then they need to go to the post office, and in between all that, they'd have to be counted into their routes.
Okay.
Tell me where to go. I'll take care of it.
Yeah. So just, I would say provide Jeff enough direction. Jeff, I can help out anyway. Yep. So we'll figure it out. But we basically are at like 1 week now until gone.
Yep. 1 week.
Okay. So do you want to just tell me what, like when you say what days do you want them to go out on?
Let's send them on each Friday. Oh no, because bond is
No, so you wanna send them, you wanna get number 2 out basically at any point, and then,
I thought number
This
2
was
out this
2.
Friday, then I thought maybe the following Thursdays.
so yes, if you do the 18th, the 25th, and the 4th, so basically every Friday.
Oh, 2 Thursdays.
Thursday is fine, so the 17th, 24th, and the 3rd.
Okay.
17th,
Which clearly tomorrow's Thursday, so we may be a day off on number 2, but.
23rd, 4th, and the 3rd.
And then those, Dean has approved the language in all of the cards.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
as a FYI to the board members, so that we are clear with.
Your
them on-
informational cards.
Do, in budget-wise, are we all set as far as cost? Are they running under 2,000 each?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Additional questions regarding that?
Not that I've.
All right, go ahead.
The deliberative session video, do you know where?
It's being processed.
The what?
The deliberative session video is being processed. And will
Yes,
get
I think
published.
Julie was offered to go and pick it up, I think from them. Kathy was in contact today to try to get it as quickly as we could. And Julie was involved in that. I don't know what day she's going, but I think it's happening. We told them we really wanted a quick turnaround.
Okay.
One other question. You had mentioned the demographic, updated demographic numbers that Ken's putting together.
So they've been uploaded into those guys
I
into the drive?
think
Yeah,
so.
those should be in the drive.
I think we have them, and whatever the update was, we can get posted.
All right, so we can post those to the website.
Yes. And I'll have Kathy put them on the board website as well.
Okay. Anything else? So I think that does bring us back to, everything else, we're back, public comments, I guess?
Are we skipping, school board meeting informational A?
School board meeting informational A.
Yes, the meeting during break was
Changed.
canceled.
We canceled
Yeah.
that? Yeah. So our next meeting would be the after
16th.
March 16th.
Yeah.
Unless, we don't need to have a meeting before the election, do we?
I don't think so.
No, the only other thing, and we can maybe coordinate it offline, but no meeting, but as far as getting into the building.
Oh, that's, yeah, so I was thinking, I ran it by Jeff as the chairman of the building committee, but maybe board members can spend some time here on a Saturday morning doing tours and walking people around that haven't been through the building.
Yep, just coordinate that with Mrs. Libby.
Okay.
The buildings typically open up the Parks and Rec on Saturdays anyway, but it'd be a good opportunity to come in, wander around, and I'm guessing if we notify the St. Peter of the hours that we'll be hanging out here, she could probably put her blast out on the.
Be a big mouth.
On the
Like you
MySpace.
to be a big mouth.
Instant Messenger, whatever you're using these days, the Twitter.
Hotspots.
The hotspots, whatever it is. So, Tina can put something out, and, that way, maybe that'll help steer some people in. And, you know, I can certainly, I can figure out my schedule and plan a Saturday. And if any of the other board members, maybe there's 2 of us here on any given Saturday, but we walk around and show people what it looks like in here and kind of give them a mental tour. Anything else? All right, well, we have kept our attorney here to finish a conversation with us for way too long. Thank you.
You don't need any of us.
So,
After you're non-public?
we're about to make a motion to go into non-public. RSA.
Are you skipping a PTO
Oh,
update?
yes, I am, but I will,
all the
I'm sorry,
board
I will receive public comments and public comments.
Yes, this public has
Yeah,
a PTO update, you're gonna get it whether you want it or not.
All right, go ahead.
They have to.
Public.
We are providing hot chocolate for teachers and staff on Friday, hot chocolate bar, fun little thing. We're trying to do just a little nice thing once a month for the teachers and staff here to thank them for everything. And the kids are gonna get some World of Kindness gifts tomorrow from the PTO that we put together with some little baggies with some little gifts in there. So a little something for the teachers, a little something for the kids.
Thanks
Happy
for
World
picking Friday.
Kindness Day.
Yeah. This is Patty's here.
Yeah, good choice on days.
All right, any other public comments? None? All right, so per NHRSA 91A3, 2, small letter C, I'll look for a motion to go back into non-public.
So moved.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Gigi. Andy, thank you for joining us, but we are going to go back to continue the deliberations we started earlier, and you are going to be bounced out of it.
Enjoy the heat, Andy.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Roll
Good night.
call. Hey, Gigi.
Yep.
Jeff.
Yes.
Myself. Yes. Everybody else, please vacate the room.